Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Rossana Galliano. Rossana Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s to parents Raldo and Graciela. She had two older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. During this time, Raldo, Rossana's father, worked as a mechanic. In 2001, Jose Arce brought his vintage car to Raldo's workshop for repairs. Jose was born on November 22, 1948. He spent more than 30 years living abroad, primarily in Greece and the United States. During his time in the United States, Jose was convicted of drug trafficking and served a 4-year prison sentence. He returned to Argentina in 1996 and owned 8 properties in a prestigious area of Buenos Aires. Despite their significant age difference, Jose and Rossana began dating shortly after meeting at her father's shop. At the time, Rossana was without a job and kept to herself, while Jose appeared to be financially stable. However, his wealth actually came from his mother, Elsa, who lived in the United States. Jose, who is 52 years old, proposed to Rossana, who is 22 years old. Rossana's mother, Graciela, expressed concerns about their significant age difference. Jose dismissed her worries, claiming that love knows no age. Rossana reassured her mother that she wanted to marry Jose, and they tied the knot on November 17, 2001, after a 7-month courtship. Jose initially thought his friendly and intelligent personality was the reason Rossana was attracted to him. They soon had a son, Geronimo. However, Jose's true nature soon became apparent, a controlling and jealous person. He frequently belittled Rossana and her family, and has eventually turned physically abusive, leaving Rossana feeling trapped and fearful. Jose's ownership of 2 guns added to his intimidating presence, allowing him to maintain control over Rossana. Her family was aware of the situation and the pain it caused. Jose often flaunted his guns in front of visitors or when visiting others. On one occasion, Rossana's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house. On another occasion, Rossana's father observed bruises on her back, bruises that she explained were caused by Jose dragging her on the ground. Rossana and Jose had their second child, but their relationship continued to deteriorate. Jose's hot temper and lack of respect have repeatedly strained their relationship, making it difficult for her to maintain a healthy home for her children despite her best efforts. The situation was further complicated by Jose's mother, Elsa, who would visit from time to time and exert control over their household decisions. By 2006, Rossana had suffered severe abuse at the hands of Jose and decided to report him to the authorities for domestic violence. A few months later, Rossana filed a second complaint, this time she requesting a medical examination to document her injuries. Rossana opened up to her sister Monica about her struggles, and they made a promise to stay connected and be there for each other whenever Rossana needed assistance. Monica becomes Rossana's rock, comforting and supporting her emotionally during difficult times. Whenever Rossana visited Monica's apartment with her children, Jose would often dictate when they had to return home, threatening to harm her. He frequently belittled Rossana, questioning her ability to be a mother. Ultimately, Rossana decided to leave Jose and move in with Monica, leaving him to stay in their house alone. Rossana filed another complaint and sought a divorce, which led to a restraining order being issued against Jose. As a result, they were only allowed to meet at a neutral location in El Remanso Exel de la Cruz, as arranged by the court, for Jose to visit their child. During one of her visits, Rossana confided in Daniel Gonzalez, a married man, who worked as a gardener and lived nearby with his own daughter. Although there were rumors about a relationship between Rossana and Daniel, this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose continued to make threats against Rossana, including a disturbing voicemail, in which Jose explicitly threatened to kill her, and she shared this message with her brother Oscar. In 2007, Rosanna met Oscar Lugo at a bar while socializing with friends. He was 32 years old, lived in Marino, and worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly connected, exchanged numbers, and began dating. Oscar was a kind, attentive, and gentleman who listened to Rosanna. At 29 years old, Rosanna felt like she was rediscovering a life she had almost forgotten. However, their budding relationship was soon threatened by Rosanna's ex-husband, Jose. He closely monitored Rosanna's activities and was aware of her new relationship with Oscar. Jose wants to prevent his divorce from Rosanna and is terrified when he hears that Rosanna has started a new relationship. He offers give Rosanna a truck in exchange for ending her relationship with Oscar Lugo, but she refuses. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital. Out of desperation, Jose devised a plan with the help of his mother Elsa. They secretly planned to hire an assassin to kill Rosanna. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Reno to pick up Rosanna's two sons, aged 4 and 3, from their father Jose. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming their son Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself, but the call ended abruptly. Rosanna then sent a casual text message to Oscar Lugo at 9:53 p.m. about their plans for the next day. At 10 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again. This time, Rosanna stepped out into the garden to get better phone reception. Unbeknownst to her, a person was hiding behind the trees. As she was on the phone, the person emerged and shot Rosanna 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, who was inside, heard the shots and saw Rosanna stumble and collapse. Panicked, Monica tried to call 911 but was unsuccessful. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo tried to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m. but couldn't reach her. He then tried to call Monica but got no response. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered the property through an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was questioned by the police and appeared shocked. After requesting a lawyer, he let the lawyer handle the proceedings and left the next day. During a thorough search of the area, a red sweater was discovered that Rosanna's family believed belonged to Jose, which led them to suspect him of the crime. The case quickly gained widespread media attention, shocking the nation and sparking a scandal. Jose and his mother publicly maintained his innocence and criticized Rosanna, claiming that she had multiple sexual partners and that they should be investigated for this crime instead of Jose. Following the incident, Daniel, the gardener, became withdrawn and isolated, refusing to speak to anyone. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo noticed Jose watching from a distance in a truck, but he did not attend the funeral or offer any condolences. Jose's defense team then shifted their focus to Monica, who was Rosanna's sister and the only witness to the case. They questioned Monica's credibility, pointing out 2 key inconsistencies in her story. Firstly, Monica did not have any blood on her clothes, which raised suspicions about her account of what happened. Secondly, instead of immediately helping her younger sister, Monica chose to run and get her phone. However, this theory lacked supporting evidence. The investigators presented a strong argument that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to handle. They also pointed out that the killer likely knew the house well, as they would have been aware that Rosanna had to go outside to get a cell phone signal. This suggests that the crime was planned in advance. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and paternal grandmother Elsa, and their grandmother Graciela was allowed to visit them. However, Monica and Oscar are not allowed near the children, as Jose expresses concern for his son's safety. Despite the court's restrictions, the children still wanted to see Aunt Monica, so Jose allowed them to visit her. During these visits, Monica took the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela was granted visitation rights to her grandchildren, though not guardianship. In an interview, Jose made some serious allegations about Rosana, claiming she had 4 lovers who all had run-ins with the law. Jose suspects Rosana of being involved with these men, and she has been gathering information about them for blackmail. Meanwhile, Oscar was given protection as a witness in his sister's case, which included wearing a tracking device and having a police escort. By the end of 2007, investigators still hadn't found enough evidence to charge any of the suspects. However, a significant turning point occurred in January 2008 when Jose was arrested and charged with aggravated homicide. This charge was based on 3 key factors: his connection to the victim, evidence that suggested he had planned the crime in advance, and the fact that multiple people were involved in the crime. On January 28, 2008, the preliminary hearings began. At the hearings, 4 people, including Raldo, Graciela, Monica, and Oscar, described Jose's disturbing behavior, including his repeated use of violence and weapons to threaten others. Rosana's mother also presented the prosecutor with the last text messages her daughter had sent before her death. The following day, Oscar Lugo, who used to date Rosana, testified against Jose, provided testimony similar to that of Rosana's family. According to Oscar Lugo, Jose had tried to ruin his and Rosana's reputations by spreading false rumors. Oscar Lugo said Rosana suspected Jose's fabrications were intended to discredit her as she and Jose were about to divorce. Opposite, Jose's lawyer disputed the claims that Jose was emotionally unstable and aggressive. On February 7, 2008, Jose's mother, Elsa, traveled from the United States to testify in a 12-hour investigative session. However, Rosana's family began to suspect that Jose's mother might have been involved in her murder. This suspicion led Raldo and Graciela's lawyer to consider requesting Jose's mother's arrest. In response, Jose and his mother's lawyer argued that her testimony actually showed she was prioritizing her grandchildren's well-being. According to Elsa's testimony, she purchased houses for them because she believed the divorce settlement would not negatively impact them. The lawyer also denied the media's claim that Jose's mother and Rosana had a poor relationship. Despite ongoing speculation and media coverage surrounding the circumstances of Rosana's death, Jose was released on bail and gained custody of his children. Meanwhile, the court deemed it unnecessary to provide police protection for Oscar, Rosana's brother, who worked as a taxi driver. However, on July 5, 2008, Oscar was attacked by 2 armed men in the early morning. They beat and threatened him for an hour before abandoning him in a vacant lot. Fortunately, Oscar was found thanks to the protective witness tracking bracelet he wore. Oscar was deeply shaken by the event, though not severely injured. The trial next began in April 2013. Jose maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings. However, in May, the trial was delayed when Jose suffered a stroke, pushing the final verdict back to November 2013. The judge determined that the murder was carefully and deliberately planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. The court concluded that Jose and Elsa were involved in planning the attack. They deliberately chose the time and place to put Rosana in a passive position and unable to defend herself. Specifically, they targeting her after a phone call would lure her outside. The court ultimately determined that Jose's primary motive for the murder was financial, because he did not want to divide the joint property with Rosana. As a result, Jose and Elsa were sentenced to life imprisonment. The higher court upheld the conviction, emphasizing Jose's threatening behavior, the domestic violence Rosana suffered, and the significant influence his mother had over him. Years later, in 2015, Jose and Elsa were granted house arrest due to health and age concerns, respectively. This allowed them to be reunited with their children. Throughout this time, the media continued to follow the story of the children. In January 2017, the court allowed the children to spend a weekend with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Rossana Galliano family thoroughly prepared their home, repainting and cleaning the house, and decorating it with balloons and a welcome sign. Graciela also cooked the children's favorite meal in anticipation of their arrival. The Rossana Galliano home was filled with joy that weekend, as the boys spent happy time together, playing soccer and video games. And even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. However, their happiness was short-lived. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away after suffering another stroke. This was a devastating blow for the children. Aunt Monica reassured them with love and calmness, promising to support whatever decision they made. The boys decided to live with Aunt Monica. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of the Parente family. William Michael Parente was born on July 20, 1949, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. His parents, Willie and Rulin Parente, raised him with values rooted in their family's history of law enforcement. His father, a New York trooper, played a significant role in shaping his upbringing. As an only child, William received his parents' undivided attention. He spent summers enjoying the sun with his family in Long Beach. William pursued his education at Brooklyn College and Brooklyn Law School, thanks in part to the financial support of his uncle, Anthony J. Russo. William worked in his uncle's Manhattan law office on the Avenue of the Americas. There, he built a reputation as a thoughtful lawyer and dedication to his family. William was known for his demeanor, courteous which extended to everyone. He worked diligently for long hours, but made sure not to overwork himself. Unlike many of his peers, he refrained from using profanity or engaging in post-work gatherings for drinks. His disciplined lifestyle and commitment to kindness set him apart in the legal community. Even on difficult days, William maintained his composure and treated everyone with respect. In 1977, after being admitted to the New York bar, William married Betty Mazzarella. He began his career at a prestigious Wall Street law firm but made a significant change in 1988. When Betty became pregnant with their first child, William decided to start his own private practice. This change happened around the same time the family moved to Garden City, New York, an affluent community in Nassau County, Long Island. Despite living in the suburbs, the William family remained connected to their Brooklyn roots. They regularly returned to their old neighborhood to enjoy local delicacies, reconnect with old friends, visit their mother, and relive cherished childhood memories. By the time he was 60, William Parente had become an experienced estate and tax attorney. He ran his practice from an office in a Queens shopping center. His wife, Betty Mazzarella, 58, dedicated her time to taking care of their home and organizing charity fundraisers in their local community. Betty was actively involved in church activities, which were an integral part of their neighborhood's social fabric. The couple had 2 daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. Stephanie, the elder daughter, was 19 years old and a sophomore at Loyola College, studying speech pathology with plans to pursue dentistry in the future. Her friendly nature made her well-liked by her classmates and teachers. She also maintained close relationships with her friends back home in Garden City. Their younger daughter, Catherine, showed remarkable talent at just 11 years old, earning her admiration from teachers and staff at Garden City Middle School. Her exceptional abilities indicated a promising future ahead. In the later stages of his legal career, William became involved in what he called bridge loans. He acted as a financial intermediary, similar to a bank, allegedly using assets from investment portfolios under his management to finance these loans. When an investor asked for their money back, William Parente was unable to return the funds or explain why he couldn't. On April 15, 2009, William, along with his wife Betty and youngest daughter Catherine, took a trip to visit their eldest daughter Stephanie in Towson, planning to surprise her. They booked room 1029 at the Sharon Hotel, near the Talone Town Center Mall, with a reservation until the 19th. When they arrived, Stephanie's friend was surprised, given that classes had just resumed after the Easter break and Stephanie was busy preparing for a chemistry exam. The visit was unexpected, especially since the parents had already planned to visit on Friday the 17th to discuss Stephanie's study abroad plans in England. Despite the initial surprise, the visit seemed like a normal family reunion. However, what took place that day remains unclear. Based on the evidence, here is what happened. Betty Mazzarella Parente was the first victim. She was brutally assaulted and suffocated in bed on Sunday morning. Later, Catherine, the youngest daughter, met a similar fate, dying from the same violence as her mother. Catherine's body was placed beside her mother's. On Sunday afternoon, Stephanie arrived at the hotel after leaving her campus and tragically met the same demise as her mother and younger sister. Her body was laid beside theirs on the bed. None of the victims showed signs of struggle. No evidence of drugging or physical restraint was found. William Parente carefully planned the annihilation of his family. On that somber Sunday, around midnight, one of Stephanie's close friends and roommates grew worried about her absence from their dorm room. After hours of worrying, the roommate called the hotel room phone to reach Stephanie. The roommate knew Stephanie planned to return to the dorm to study for final exams, so they were surprised when William Parente, Stephanie's father, answered the call. William explained that Stephanie was staying at the hotel with family. The roommate accepted this excuse and ended the call, unaware that Stephanie was already dead. Later, the roommate thought back on the conversation and remembered that William's tone seemed unusual. On Monday morning, William Parente ended his life by using a knife he had bought at a nearby mall. He inflicted fatal injuries on himself in the hotel bathroom. When the family failed to check out, hotel staff became concerned. School Loyola College also raised concerns about Stephanie's unexplained absence from classes, especially since it was a crucial time for her final exams. The college contacted the hotel, requesting a welfare check on Stephanie and her family. At 3 p.m., a housekeeper tried to enter their 10th floor room but found the door locked and received no response. The housekeeper alerted other staff, and a hotel manager entered the room. The manager found William Parente's lifeless body in the bathroom, having taken his own life with a knife. The manager quickly called emergency services and continued to investigate. As he entered the room further, he found 3 bodies carefully arranged on one of the beds. The victims were Betty Mazzarella and her 2 daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. The Baltimore County Police were immediately called to the scene, and all other guests on the 10th floor were relocated as part of the investigation. The police also took the family's Mercedes-Benz SUV from the hotel parking lot. After investigating, they determined that William Parente had committed a murder-suicide on that Sunday. And the police found that the causes of death were asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. They believe that Betty and Catherine were the first victims, followed by Stephanie. The police think that one of William's last interactions was with Stephanie's boyfriend, who tried to call Stephanie around midnight. However, Stephanie had already been killed by her father by then. Shortly after the call, William likely went to the bathroom and took his own life using a knife he had bought earlier from the mall. It is believed that William Parente's decision to kill his family and then commit suicide may have stemmed from an investigation into his possible involvement in a major fraud. William Parente was accused of being part of a Ponzi scheme, a type of investment scam where money from new investors is used to pay existing ones, often resulting in huge financial losses. Investors have been scammed of around $20 million, with one investor claiming a loss of $450,000. Investigations showed that William had issued bounced checks totaling $245,000 to investors, leading to further complaints to the New York Attorney General's office. After William Parente's death, some investors came forward with losses totaling millions of dollars. A colleague of Williams made a poignant observation: financial losses can be recovered, but the loss of human life is irreparable. Friends and family have struggled to overcome their feelings of grief following the horrific incident. A memorial service was held at Loyola College on Monday night to honor Stephanie's memory. The family William Parente home, once full of life, became a somber space filled with tributes such as flowers and candlelit vigils. A funeral service was held at St. Joseph's Church in Garden City to commemorate Betty and her daughters. According to reports, Catherine's middle school classmates were transported by bus to attend the service. Stephanie's college peers made a significant effort to join, driving from Talon and arriving as early as 4 a.m. for the morning ceremony. The family was laid to rest together at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale, New York. In contrast, William Parente received a separate, private funeral service at a different location. He was cremated, but the location of his ashes was not publicly disclosed. The horrific actions of this merciless perpetrator have caused immense distress for the victims and their loved ones. The Abril Perez case unveils layers of tragedy and mystery, set against the backdrop of a Mexican night where stars shine brightly, yet secrets linger in the shadows. This story revolves around Abril, whose life became a series of unfortunate events. The case progressed slowly. It took months before the first suspects were captured. The Secretary General of the Mexican Security Council, Omar Garcia, announced that on March 5, 2020, 2 individuals connected to this crime were detained. He made it clear that all detainees had been identified and were under investigation. The initial suspects were Juan Carlos Rodriguez Ortiz, the car driver, and Rodolfo Daniel Bandera Sandoval, also known as Changa Leon, who was identified as the shooter. These 2 became prime suspects post their arrests. Abril's family insisted on Juan Carlos's arrest, believing him to be the crime's orchestrator. Following an attack on Abril, judges who had initially freed Juan returned to work but faced suspension again due to public outrage. After 7 months, on October 28, 2 more suspects were detained: Oscar, known as El Oso, and Alejandro, known as El Corral. El Corral was arrested with his girlfriend, Magda Carina. In her bag were found 3 packets of illegal substances alongside a weapon and weighing scales for narcotics. El Oso was apprehended at his home, where police discovered 182 doses of illegal substances, guns, and 300 rounds of large-caliber ammunition. These detainees belonged to a gang led by Juan Carlos Maldon, also known as Juan Balta, who was later arrested too. Known as a trusted leader within one of Mexico City's most notorious gangs, he was found in possession of significant quantities of illegal substances during his capture. Court records indicated that Juan Balta met Juan Carlos while in prison, offering protection for money. After his release, Juan continued receiving financial aid from Balta. It is believed that Juan Carlos sought Balta's assistance to arrange the murder of 2 people who threatened his ex-wife's life. Abril Perez's tale is equally heart-wrenching. Born in Monterrey in 1971, Abril grew up under challenging circumstances with her mother Maria del Suero, tirelessly working to secure the best education in life for Abril and her siblings, Javier and Ana. Despite hardships, Abril excelled academically with a clear goal: achieving financial independence through education. As she matured into an intelligent and altruistic woman with notable leadership qualities, she pursued higher education rigorously. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and later acquired her master's degree in business from Monterrey Institute of Science and Technology. Her career flourished in digital sales, where she rose swiftly to hold an executive director position at Bilbo Bank in America by the early 1990s. During this prosperous phase in her career, Abril met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, a driven entrepreneur born on November 11, 1968. Sharing many academic accolades and professional aspirations, Juan also graduated from Monterrey Institute like Abril and furthered his studies at prestigious institutes such as the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. Both driven by ambition and intellect, quickly grew close both personally and professionally. They collaborated on several projects while nurturing friendships within shared social circles. Over time, their camaraderie blossomed into love, leading them down the aisle together in 1994. Together, they spearheaded numerous successful ventures, including PAG Mobile and Plascom online stores. Their combined efforts contributed significantly towards establishing DM Store as a leading e-commerce entity in Mexico by 1999. The couple's life appeared to be a genuine fairy tale. Both achieved remarkable successes in their careers and were blissful together. Their joy amplified in 2001 with the birth of their first daughter, Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., and in 2005, another son, Julio Andres, was born. Despite her busy schedule, Abril always made time for her children, personally attending to their needs and school. Her dedication earned admiration from everyone around her. Juan Carlos was also seen as an exemplary father. Together, they cultivated an ideal family that many envied. But the reality was different. During that period, the family faced substantial challenges, suffering from Juan's short temper. He had a volatile nature and could unleash his anger on anyone around him. Initially, it began with verbal abuse. Juan made Abril uncomfortable with hurtful insults. Gradually, the situation worsened as he started using physical violence, regularly beating his wife. Abril tried to conceal it from friends and family because she believed staying with Juan would secure the best future for their children. By 2009, others began suspecting something was wrong at home due to Abril's evident depression and visible bruises. However, despite inquiries about a possible divorce, she insisted on staying with her husband. The situation continued to get worse up until 2014. Despite Juan Carlos reaching the pinnacle of his career in 2014 as an influential figure in the Amazon retail industry in Mexico, turmoil persisted within the family. By 2015, his new role as Amazon director necessitated a move to Mexico City, a change that did not solve their problems. The abuse continued daily while he maintained a facade of being a loving husband and father publicly. Juan Carlos often shared social media posts calling Abril the love of his life, while privately controlling and accusing her of infidelity, even hiring a detective to prove it. His career soared while his marriage crumbled before his eyes. By 2018, tensions between him and Abril were unbearable. Despite her efforts to maintain family unity after a trip to Monterrey for Christmas celebrations with her family in 2018, an incident made her realize she could no longer continue living with him. During this visit, and driven by irrational rage, Juan strangled Abril after receiving misleading photos from a private investigator, falsely implying an affair with a colleague. On January 4th, 2019, Abril finally decided enough was enough and filed for divorce. Early one morning, not long after this decision, while asleep, Abril awoke from severe blows to her head inflicted by Juan wielding a baseball bat, thinking initially that perhaps something catastrophic like ceiling collapse must have occurred, only soon recognizing it was indeed her husband assaulting her maliciously. Attempting desperately but unsuccessfully fleeing, whilst calling out loud, attracting attention, ultimately saved by eldest son, then 16 years old, who intervened preventing further harm. Whisking mother off hospital, seeking urgent medical treatment given extensive injuries sustained. Subsequently, following these harrowing events, Juan engaged heavily online, alleging numerous accusations against estranged wife, including infidelity, theft, alongside bizarre claims wounded by stabbing, even posting graphic images incriminatingly, albeit deceptively manipulative, stirring confusion, disbelief, widely questioning veracity, credibility, amidst alarmingly strange, unsupported assertions. Curiously culminating contradictorily stating sensationally considerably fabricated declaration preposterously claiming own premature demise, astonishingly baffling many, since plainly alive ative concerned, reflecting potential underlying complexities, yet conspicuously revealing tragically profound adverse impact, profoundly affecting gravely matters warranting earnest consideration, reflective deliberation, insight, acknowledging persistently injustice, undeniably suffered, profoundly consequentially induced, primarily generated, systematically, intentionally premeditated abusive conduct behavior, regrettably adversely experienced, enriched perspective, understanding eloquently articulated herein, professionally gravitating, empathetic recognition, importance, human, judicious appreciating, jointly, responsibly, collectively, fostering principled integrity, social positive transformation, conducive, harmonious, peaceful, equitable coexistence, pivotal, quintessential, consequential, imperative. After being discharged from the hospital, Abril immediately filed a police report against her husband. Authorities granted her custody of her 2 children. Juan Carlos was ordered to pay alimony of 6,000 Mexican pesos per month, about $350. However, this amount did not cover the costs of raising 2 young children. Despite these financial difficulties and the fear of her husband, Abril decided to start a new chapter in her life and was determined not to be discouraged for the sake of her children. Subsequently, Abril and her children moved to Monterrey. From there, she observed the trial against Juan Carlos and filed for divorce. After enduring such a traumatic experience and constant abuse, she began rethinking her life decisions. She joined a Christian group dedicated to protecting families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her goal was to create an organization that would help women who had been abused like she had been. Thanks to such an organization, Abril herself managed to heal and even forgave her ex-husband. While she was striving to rebuild her life, the lawsuit against Juan continued. After 9 long months following the attack, authorities charged him with attempted murder. The case went to court where Judge Federico Mask decided on an informal arrest for Juan. Thus, he was taken into custody for several weeks. However, Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, another judge, named Hector Jimenez, reclassified the crime. He opined that photographs from the hospital and testimonies from Abril and her son were insufficient to prove Juan's guilt definitively. Moreover, he believed that Juan did not intend to kill Abril, otherwise he would have succeeded. According to the judge, the baseball bat used in the attack was not considered a weapon suitable for murder. Consequently, the case no longer qualified as femicide, and Juan's preliminary arrest was canceled. There were only a few hearings left in Juan's trial. The outcome remained uncertain, causing increasing anxiety and frustration for Abril, her family, and friends. Desperately seeking relief, Abril wrote a letter to the judge pleading for consideration of her fears for her safety. She firmly believed Juan posed a real threat, but received no response to her plea. Following this development, Juan Carlos was released from custody and began actively fighting for custody of his children. Abril had no choice but to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City frequently for all hearings related to their case, and subjected her children to psychological evaluations because Juan Carlos claimed she had turned them against him. This supposedly explained why they wanted nothing more than distance from their father forever again. A week before crucial hearing session date drew near, the crucial one, Abril gathered 3 kids, telling them how much love felt pushing each towards dreams fulfillment while urging strength needed forgiveness. Side note, relatable indeed. On November 25th, in compliance throughout with X's instructions avoiding legal tangles, separating loved ones altogether, arrived Mexico City, intended meeting, taking place same day when thousands, women marked street celebration, Anti-Gender Violence Day, globally impactful symbol, indeed reflecting broader struggle ongoingly seen, meanwhile yes, continuing relentless fight, march, so to speak, right? Time passed until March 19th next year, bringing turning point judicial-wise, canceling previous handling actions, revisiting the settling attempted murder. Abril reinstated following collective push, relatives prosecution line formal appeals requiring plus subsequent petitions array highlighting repetition involving case assuring dominion, Finally, May settled arrests, finalized trio women Solomon rounding elements critical search warrants, altogether findings detailed captured each identified notably care overall, background thoroughness punctuate course interims pan explaining prosecutor touching essence clarifications, juxtaposing initial attempt, comparably then elevating upholding right societal realms, subsequently prompted sweeping comprehensive research, yielding vital breakthrough imperative efforts nearing affirmative closure, integrity bind scrutinizing laying hopper diverse parallel obligations extended Rawls pursuit persistently subsequently engaged recognized alias Shalon loop continued fundamentally. During the interrogation, Rolf, also known as El Shalon, confessed that he was the individual who shot and killed Abril. Ultimately, he pleaded guilty, stating that Juan Carlos had offered him $10,000 to commit the crime. He detailed how Juan Carlos had contacted him while still in pretrial detention. Over the phone, Juan provided Abril's address in Mexico City, along with instructions on how to perform surveillance on her and execute the crime. Furthermore, Juan assured him that a gun would be waiting for him in Monterrey. Rolf recounted going to Monterrey expecting to receive the firearm. However, no one reached out to him for several days. He then returned to his residence in Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until Juan's release from prison. Upon his release, Juan contacted Rolf with updated plans. Now wanted Abril killed in Mexico City since he had managed to lure her there. Due to procedural rules, these cases couldn't be consolidated. Thus, they were divided into separate hearings. The initial trial focused solely on Rodolfo Daniel Bendes, the direct perpetrator, and Juan Carlos Rodriguez. Subsequent trials would involve the other accused parties. In August 2022, the first round of court proceedings commenced. During these sessions, the prosecutor's office presented testimonies from 28 witnesses and 14 pieces of expert evidence. Rolf El Shalon detailed how he planned and executed the murder and once again pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court found Rodolfo Daniel Bendes and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty of committing femicide and sentenced them each to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay 56,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $30,000 in damages. Following their conviction, they were transferred to a pretrial detention center to begin their sentences. The Abril family publicly announced their intention to appeal Rodolfo's sentence. They considered it too lenient, given his direct involvement in her death, further complicating matters regarding other defendants. In October 2014, a judge decided to split the trials of 4 defendants: Juan Carlos Maldonado, Juan Baldra, Eli Carnal, Amada Viente Rodriguez, and Garcia Alicia Flores into separate hearings. Prosecutors opposed this decision due to concerns it would prolong the legal process and incur additional costs since each defendant would need to testify multiple times. Abril's tragic fate deeply unsettled not only her family, but also society at large in Mexico. Just when it seemed justice was within reach through these trials, they resumed yet again under distressing circumstances surrounding her demise. According to reconstructed events, after one such court hearing, Abril entered a car with her children and legal counsel en route back home via Monterrey Airport, where an assassin on motorcycle ambushed them at an intersection near their route, opening fire specifically targeting her head, while miraculously sparing most occupants inside, except grazing one's limb incidentally. Despite transporting Abril alive, hospital's efforts ended vainly, succumbing injuries 6 hours arriving tragic incident shockwaves through community. Especially Javier brother, urgent quest resolve misconceptions pervading suspicions, implicate, released prisoner officially. However, authorities declared unknown identity, intent shooter impeded, qualifying categorization femicide, necessary apprehension sought. That's why this case was classified simply as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather all necessary evidence to consider it a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to discuss the situation, accusing Juan Carlos. This accusation led to her account being deleted. Abril's family feared that this man would go unpunished for his actions. They sought public attention through social media as well. Abril passed away on a day commemorating the fight against gender-based violence. Her death took on added significance because of this. The family organized numerous protests and marches in her honor, demanding justice. Social media users began discussing how Abril had expressed her fear many times and how authorities ignored her pleas for help. Amid their grief and frustration, Abril's family and friends held a funeral in Monterrey, with a mass at the Bonito Flores Chapel. Dozens came to extend condolences and honor Abril's memory, also demanding justice. The procession moved to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles for the burial. Abril's case highlighted issues around gender-based violence, especially those involving judges releasing men who attacked women. Ex-husband Juan Carlos was released after appeals, which allowed him to bring Abril to Mexico City unimpeded, leading to her death. The Mexican General Prosecutor's Office initiated an investigation against judges Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez for enabling Juan Carlos's release from prison. Members of the former president's party also got involved. Andrés Manuel López Obrador urged the removal of Judge Mosca in the Chamber of Deputies due to his involvement in a controversial case where he freed a doctor accused of disrespecting a patient in a public hospital. Charges were downgraded from femicide to sexual violence, leading to his release. During the scandal surrounding Abril's case on November 29th, Rafael Gara, president of Mexico City's Supreme Court, temporarily suspended all judges involved in Juan Carlos's case. Claudia Sheinbaum, head of government for Mexico City, confirmed an investigation into Abril's case as femicide was underway. If proven that Juan Carlos was responsible, judges involved could face consequences. Local and international media reported that despite evidence against him, Juan was released during legal proceedings. The family announced forming the Voice of Abril, a nonprofit aimed at offering information and support for violence victims. Protests over Abril's death pushed for reclassification against Juan Carlos, so he would face attempted murder charges leading potentially to imprisonment. After being charged, Juan posted online that he wished for justice in resolving Abril's crime and expressed willingness to cooperate with police, while stating conflicts with Abril were not fatal, leading community outrage. His daughter Ana Cecilia publicly accused him of years-long physical and mental abuse towards Abril and their children too, sharing photos purportedly showing Abril hospitalized following an attack by him with a baseball bat, according to herself. Her father was a narcissistic sociopath who got out of prison by bribing officials. A few days later, amidst the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos. Not due to the Abril case, but rather for violating judicial duties. He had been released on the condition he'd visit the police station weekly. However, he failed to comply. Additionally, he missed 2 court hearings. Judge Agustin Monreal Gaspar subsequently revoked his release order. During one hearing, the judge read out a letter from Juan claiming he feared for his life and hence avoided attending the hearings. He mentioned that since Abril's death, both he and his family had received threats, believing that appearing in court could lead to someone seeking revenge on him. Nonetheless, the judge did not accept this as a valid excuse and thus issued an arrest warrant. Juan was also barred from leaving the country. Meanwhile, the investigation pressed on, with authorities determined to uncover the entire truth. As part of their efforts, they came across another letter written by Juan, where he again denied any involvement in Abril's death. He asserted he never wished her harm and had no intent to kill her. He narrated his version of events from that night. According to him, they argued and Abril first picked up a knife and stabbed him in the side. He claimed hitting her with a bat was his first act of self-defense and maintained he never attempted to take her life. Naturally, this letter incensed those present at its reading. None found Juan Carlos's words credible. The investigation pointed towards Juan Carlos as the primary suspect in this matter. Furthermore, police identified at least 7 other individuals implicated in the crime against Abril after analyzing surveillance footage from nearby where these events occurred. The videos depicted 2 cars trailing Abril as she departed from the courthouse. Both drivers were communicating with the individual who ultimately fired the fatal shot at Abril's head. Post-attack footage showed all three vehicles speeding away from the scene together. Although identities of those involved were not established at that point, investigators concluded there was strong evidence suggesting Juan Carlos's involvement in orchestrating this crime. Investigators believed that Juan had met these individuals during his time in prison and had compensated one of them to ensure his safety. According to their findings, the people who protected him were released from prison, followed by Juan's release. Subsequently, he allegedly paid them to end Abril's life. Only Juan knew precisely Abril's route to Mexico City because he was the one who requested meeting with her. When this information came to light, no law firm wanted to represent him. Abril's family, friends, and colleagues provided all possible information to the authorities to facilitate his capture. However, a few days later, sources from the country's general prosecutor's office reported that Juan had left Mexico. They indicated that he managed to flee by crossing the border between Mexico and the United States. Mexican authorities promptly contacted Interpol to circulate information about the search for Juan Carlos, and Interpol immediately commenced their search for him. Soon enough, he was wanted by authorities in over 151 countries, determined to locate him at any cost. By late January 2024, there were no new developments in the case. 4 years have passed since Abril's tragic death without any accountability for those responsible for this crime. Her children are now living with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, clinging to hope that justice will eventually be served. To this day, everyone is asking, where is Juan Carlos? His apprehension remains a top priority for law enforcement agencies. Abril's family has vowed not to cease their fight for justice until he is found and held accountable. The state of Delaware was left reeling by these events. Madison Sparrow headed out to meet her friends for ice cream on October 2, 2020, but she never returned home. Her mother immediately alerted the police. Thanks to the swift actions of the officers, disturbing details began to emerge. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, USA. She was the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige, and had two sisters, Molly and Wendelin. Although not much is known about her family, we do know Wendelin was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, from Richard's previous relationship. Over time, they settled in Newark, Newcastle County, Delaware, the setting for this story. Madison's younger sister, Molly, was born on October 5, 2010. She quickly became Madison's best friend. With a deep affection for children, Madison was the eldest among 8 cousins who all cherished her dearly. She never missed a chance to play with them or put on enchanting performances that everyone found delightful. Her laughter was truly infectious. She had a cheerful spirit that could light up any room. Yet there were moments when Madison would become pensive and dreamy. Her father shared that even from a young age, she showed wisdom beyond her years. She observed and reflected carefully before reacting. Madison's affectionate nature extended to her hugs. They could lift anyone's spirits instantly. Both friends and family saw her as deeply loyal and always considerate about their well-being. Madison's curiosity stayed with her throughout her childhood. She loved learning and experimenting, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, a global youth organization for girls. By the fall of 2012, existing Girl Scout troops were fully occupied, so her mom stepped up as their first troop leader. Madison, at the age of 9, entered the Brownies section, tailored for girls aged 7 to 10. Over the years, Madison distinguished herself as a cookie seller and earned several badges marking her exceptional performance in various duties. Throughout almost 10 in the Girl Scouts organization, she developed strong friendships. Later, driven by a desire to work with other young people and create a positive impact, she volunteered to assist in her sister Molly's troop. Madison was warm-hearted and committed to serving God and her country. She always lent a helping hand while adhering to the principles of the Girl Scouts. Like any young girl, she delighted in having fun. Even during her teenage years, she was known as the queen of pranks and loved planning parties with friends, whether it was movie nights or makeovers that included manicures and pedicures. She could stay up all night but often struggled to wake up before 2 p.m. the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met another central figure in this story, Anuka Stalinsky. Anuka was born in Newark on July 9, 2003. The two quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Anuka is limited, but we know her parents were Robert Stalinsky and Robin Kars. As of 2004, they lived on Arona Mink Drive in Newark. Madison and Anuka moved on to middle school together after completing elementary school. There they made new friends, including Noah Sharp, a fellow Newark native born on August 23, 2001. Details about Noah's background are limited too. However, it's known his mother Nikki Sharp had two other children, David and Brianna. The trio, Madison, Anuka, and Noah, would often go out together for ice cream or take long walks through the city's green spaces. When Noah and Madison crossed paths, mutual attraction sparked between them, and within a few months, a teenage romance blossomed. Initially, they were head over heels in love. However, in early 2020, after being together for just over a year, Madison decided to end the relationship without giving any apparent reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends. Nonetheless, Noah was heartbroken as he still deeply loved her. During this period, Anuka became a trusted confidant for Noah. They started seeing each other more frequently and texting almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, with time he began dating Anuka. Despite his new relationship with Anuka, Noah did not lose contact with Madison. On her 17th birthday on September 12, 2020, he even visited her and brought a gift. That day, Madison's mother noticed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Anuka learned about this meeting, she became consumed with jealousy. She couldn't accept that her beloved continued to be friends with his ex-girlfriend. Likewise, Noah's resentment turned into anger. He wanted Madison to feel the same pain he was enduring. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Anuka and Noah began planning how to end Madison's life. Through text messages, FaceTime calls, and in-person meetings, they exchanged chilling ideas about possible weapons and methods for disposing of the body once the crime was committed. The messages they sent each other indicated their intention to make Madison suffer. Anuka suggested several options, including using a knife to inflict a fatal wound to the heart. They also discussed using a shotgun or perhaps a baseball bat. However, according to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of using a shotgun since it would produce too much noise. Although Noah wasn't very confident initially, they eventually decided on using a blunt object during these discussions. They also performed calculations to determine how many bricks would be necessary to prevent Madison's body from floating if they decided to dispose of her in the water. When doubts arose, they mentioned that another option was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find shovels. In the end, they devised what they believed to be the perfect plan. Madison loved ice cream almost as much as she loved Halloween. Her cheerful spirit eagerly awaited October every year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Anuka knew Madison's taste well and took advantage of this. On Friday, October 2, 2020, she called Madison and invited her out for ice cream and to spend the day together. Madison immediately agreed because she hadn't spoken to her friend for a long time and wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was in 3 days. On that day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, and a blue sweatshirt with the inscription New Jersey. She finished her look with white ghost-shaped earrings. Normally, she didn't wear much jewelry, especially earrings, but with Halloween approaching, she decided these ghost earrings would be perfect. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to Heather, saying she would see her later, and left. Although there were no actual ghosts in this story, what happened next was far scarier. It was the last time her mother saw her alive. The following hours, days, weeks, and years turned into a true nightmare for the Sparrow family, her friends, and the residents of Newark. Several hours later, Heather began receiving insulting text messages from Madison's phone number, alongside messages implying that Madison had left the country. Heather initially thought it was a joke and even replied wishing her daughter luck in her endeavors, while joking that she had forgotten her passport in the safe. However, no response came back, even when Heather called Madison's phone. Heather became increasingly concerned when there was still no answer, while she was out with Molly, taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons. The lack of response began to seriously worry her. Heather decided to call Annika, aware that they were supposed to meet later in the day. Upon answering, Annika burst into tears, explaining that Madison had insulted her and that she dropped her off near a store. Annika then suggested contacting Noah, but he wasn't responding either. Frustrated, Heather asked Annika to continue trying to reach him. The three of them, however, no new information surfaced. Disheartened, Heather opted to return home. On her way back, she received several messages from her daughter's friends who had also received unusual SMS messages and were keen to understand what was happening. Once she arrived home and searched for any clues, Heather found nothing that indicated her daughter had run away. Even the money given to her for her birthday, her clothes and her credit card were still in her room. These strange messages made little sense. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without taking essential items, like a bag with clothes and money. At approximately 8:30 p.m., when Madison failed to come home, Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite continuous efforts to connect with people, all attempts were fruitless. Upon learning of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. She also notified Madison's father, residing in Colorado, who promptly shared information on social media appealing for assistance in locating his daughter. On the next day, Saturday, October 3, 2020, the Delaware State Police issued a golden alert for 17-year-old Madison. This alert triggers all required procedures for searching for a missing person within Delaware. Over 2 days, police search teams, family members, and numerous friends scoured the farmlands near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen alive. The media also spread information about the search, urging people to provide any details they might have related to Madison's whereabouts. Delaware State Police simultaneously started questioning Madison's friends, and all evidence pointed to her ex-boyfriend. According to some sources, the girl headed to a wooded area in Newark behind an elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she disappeared. Detectives detained and interrogated the young man for almost 9 hours from October 4th through 5th, presenting several conflicting scenarios and insisting he didn't know what had happened. Eventually, the barrier of silence broke, shocking everyone. The young man confessed not only to taking Madison's life, but also claimed that Annika was his accomplice. Noah informed police that Annika hated Madison because she was jealous of her relationship with him. He also elaborated on how deeply he had been hurt by his breakup with Madison. Noah recounted driving Madison to the wooded area behind the elementary school. As they walked along a trail, he hid behind bushes with an aluminum baseball bat in hand. He told officers how Madison was happy to spend time with her friend and unsuspecting of the danger ahead. Suddenly emerging from hiding, Noah struck her on the head twice with great force. He admitted that he put all his strength into the second blow and said that it was at that moment he snapped after months of uncontrollable anger towards her for breaking his heart. Unable to contain himself, he continued delivering more blows to her body. Following the assault on Madison, Noah and Annika transported her body using Anna's car to a site beneath a bridge near the intersection of I-95 and a Delaware State road, approximately 15 minutes away from the crime scene and close to a warehouse. Upon reaching this location, they tried to submerge her body in the river, but failed. Instead, they opted to conceal it in a shallow grave they dug at the same spot. Using details provided by Noah, investigators meticulously searched the designated area. There, they unearthed an aluminum baseball bat used as a weapon bearing traces of blood. The crime scene yielded clothing worn by Madison when she left home, with some articles showing evidence of scorching. Subsequently, the guided law enforcement to a wooded area near the junction of I-95 and Delaware State Road. It was here that he and his accomplice had clandestinely interred the body on Monday, October 5, 2020. Corporal Heather Piper announced the finding of the body, leaving Madison's family, friends, and the entire community in disbelief. A few days later, on Friday, October 9th, hundreds of individuals gathered at the high school football field to honor and remember the victim. The autopsy revealed that Madison's death resulted from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found Noah's and Anna's DNA in physical evidence collected both at the crime scene and where the body was discovered. Noah faced charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime, and first-degree conspiracy. He was placed in a correctional facility with bail set at $1 million. On Monday, November 16, 2020, over a month after the tragic event and following the processing of necessary evidence, 17-year-old Anna was also arrested. Her arrest occurred after a grand jury in Newcastle County indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family was in disarray. Heather repeatedly stated that a rational reason for why her daughter's life was taken would never be found. Her main plea for justice was that these criminals would never again be able to harm others or themselves. Although Noah admitted to detectives that he committed the crime during an official court indictment, he did not plead guilty. This led to speculation that his defense might argue mental instability, a common tactic lawyers sometimes use to justify their clients' actions. This case appeared to be no exception. During a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that at the time of the murder, Noah was undergoing treatment for potential schizophrenia under the care of a psychiatrist. The lawyer also mentioned that Noah had sustained an injury in Chester County, Pennsylvania, approximately 3 weeks prior to the crime. She elaborated that due to this head injury, her client experienced gaps in memory and other issues. However, she did not specify the cause or severity of the injury. In May 2021, Anuka pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her lawyers negotiated a deal with prosecutors, wherein she agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intent to end Madison's life. According to court documents, several individuals, including those close to the victim, informed the police about Noah's alleged alter ego, a second personality. Prosecutors contended that Noah had spread this information as part of a premeditated plan to murder Madison and later used this narrative in court. After 2 years of awaiting justice, the trial began on October 20, 2022, in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called by Deputy Attorneys General Matt Foley and JNDS. The courtroom displayed hours of video recordings of Noah's interrogations with state police detectives. The audience listened to Noah's altering narratives until he ultimately confessed. The defense challenged this evidence by emphasizing that their client was interrogated for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that detectives manipulated the interrogation process. Noah received guidance on what to say and was subjected to pressure, but it was clear to everyone that this was simply a desperate attempt to justify the actions of the accused by any available means. The prosecution also presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Annika, detailing their plan for the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense tried to convince the court that someone else had control over Noah's device and that he wasn't the one messaging Annika. Noah's mother and brother were called to testify sequentially, giving conflicting accounts several times. Nikki stated that her son was not wet when he returned home on the evening of October 2nd, while David claimed his brother was wet and looked like he'd been in a swamp. Nikki mentioned that shortly after Noah's arrival, Anuka entered the house calmly. In contrast, David said she entered angrily, slamming the door. Prosecutor Matt Frawley asked Nikki if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him. She replied no. However, Prosecutors played an audio recording of a phone call between Noah and his mother from a month before the trial, where they discussed surveillance footage from an elementary school. In the conversation, Noah mentioned his face wasn't visible in the video, where he and Anuka were seen near the elementary school about an hour before Madison's murder. Nikki reacted with relief. The video showed an African American of similar height and build as Noah carrying a baseball bat and walking into woods with a girl. The defense questioned relatives about head injuries Noah allegedly suffered on September 13, 2020, and another unconfirmed injury from a bicycle fall just hours before police interrogations on October 4th. Noah's lawyers suggested these injuries might have caused dissociative amnesia in their attempt to justify his statements. Faced with the claim he made to the police, the prosecutors questioned whether the injury was part of a conspiracy to murder Madison. The defense contested this point somewhat uncertainly. Anika confirmed all the prosecution's arguments during her 3-hour testimony in court. In her account, she calmly explained how Noah convinced her that Madison was speaking ill of her behind her back. Friends and relatives of the victim, however, emphasized that Madison never spoke negatively about her friends. After 8 days of court sessions and presenting over 250 pieces of evidence, the jury took only 3 hours to reach a final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the jury's decision was announced, Noah and his mother showed no emotion. Noah simply turned and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried in relief. Before leaving the courtroom, Heather Madison's mother uttered a phrase her daughter had used before: "Choose light, not darkness. Love conquers all." She also expressed gratitude, saying, "We want to thank our friends and family. This has been a 2-year process, and we couldn't have done this without their love and constant support." She continued by thanking the community and specifically Newark Charter School and its administration and families. Additionally, she appreciated those who supported the Love Wins 5K over the past 2 years and backed the Madison Sparrow Memorial Scholarship aimed at aiding future educators. Regarding Anika, when Noah's guilty verdict was announced, prosecutors stated that according to Delaware state law, she would be recommended a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years, as she was a minor at the time of the crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In a heart-wrenching tale of tragedy, we meet Eva Blanco Puig, a young soul taken too soon at just 16 years old. For 18 agonizing years, her story remained shrouded in darkness until the truth, once elusive, finally surfaced through DNA samples, unmasking the face of the perpetrator. For 18 long years, the questions haunted those who loved her. Who could do such a thing? Why was justice so elusive? But the memory of Eva's radiant spirit, Neva, faded, as it was for Eva etched in the hearts of those she left behind. And thus, the relentless pursuit of justice for their loved one, Neva, ceased. Eva Blanco Puig was born on February 17, 1981, in Spain to Manuel Blanco and Olga Puig. By 1997, the couple was living a quiet and peaceful life, having already settled in Aldehuela, a small municipality of Madrid that was well away from all the bustle of the capital, together with their 3 daughters, Eva, Rebecca, and Maria. Eva, among her closest companions and beloved kin, was often portrayed as a rather quiet girl, yet exuded an enchanting air of mirth and dependability, and was an absolute delight to be around. She also thrived in the realm of athletic pursuits, with her passion for sports illuminating her days with unbridled joy. At school, she found herself embraced by a multitude of admirers for her magnetic charisma and warm-hearted nature that knew no bounds. Eva always set a good example for her younger sisters, and being a responsible girl, she did not give her parents great displeasure as she complied with all the rules that they dictated, with one of them being the curfew that they had always set for her. However, on this fateful day, things did not go as planned. On the afternoon of April 19th, Eva and her friends were playing tennis, enjoying the carefree moments that only youth could offer. But little did they know that this seemingly ordinary afternoon would take a dark and harrowing turn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, being a Saturday, they decided to go to a local disco to cherish their unbreakable bonds of friendship and spend more time with each other, extending it into the late night. Eva had already asked her mother for permission to extend her curfew slightly, and Olga, seeing that her daughter had always been responsible, rewarded her as they agreed that by midnight she should already be back home. The clock struck 11:30 p.m., and little by little, the group bid their farewells, heading home. Among them was Blanco, whose journey home would unfortunately lead her into the shadows of mystery. Accompanied by her friend, Eva ventured towards a vacant lot that served as a shortcut to her home. It was a path she had walked countless times before, but destiny had something else in store for her. At around 11:45 p.m., they parted ways as Blanco took her familiar path through the dark, vacant lot, with no inkling that it would be their last goodbye. As midnight approached, Eva's mother grew restless, her heart burdening with worry as her daughter failed to arrive home. She reached out to Eva's friends, hoping for any clue to her whereabouts, only to be told that everyone had already parted ways, and Eva should have already arrived at home by then. This rang her alarm bells as she alerted her husband, who was a tow truck driver. He then began searching for Eva in the town, together with his nephew, a local police officer, and also with the help of the father of one of Eva's friends. When the clock struck 1 a.m., Blanco's parents reported her disappearance at the local civil guard station. But to their dismay, the officers showed little concern for filing a disappearance report for someone missing just a little over an hour. The guard at the door callously dismissed the seriousness of the situation, claiming that children of her age were all on drugs, and she was probably lying in a doorway or on some sidewalk, clearly implying she was not worth that much attention to them. In the darkness of the night, Blanco's father made a harrowing journey to the local civil guard station up to 15 times. With frustration in his heart, he criticized the institution for their lack of urgency in searching rural roads or utilizing vehicles before sunrise. He accused them of neglect, citing a shortage of gas as their excuse. But the civil guards refuted his claims, defending their customary practice of waiting for a few hours to pass before initiating a search after a missing person report. A father's plea for his daughter's safe return hung in the balance as the truth behind the delay remained shrouded in doubt and despair. As the night deepened, the frantic search for Blanco commenced at 2:30 a.m. Her family, friends, and authorities scoured the streets of the town and the surrounding area, but the civil guard had not yet filed an official missing person report. A missing report was filed at 8 a.m., and the decision to publicize the case was made at noon. Blanco's family reached out to the regional TV station Telemadrid, imploring them for help. At 9 a.m., Eva's lifeless body had been discovered by two elderly residents, 6 kilometers away from Algueta, near a road construction site between Cobeña and Belvis de Jarama. The area was known to be frequented by young couples seeking privacy inside their cars. Initially, a dreadful accident was suspected, with the possibility that she might have been run over by a car. However, when the civil guard arrived, the horrifying truth emerged. Blanco, lying face down on the ground, had been mercilessly stabbed multiple times while desperately trying to escape her assailant. The clothes she wore on the day of her disappearance, a pair of jeans, a dark sweater, and mountain boots, clung to her lifeless form, with only one sleeve of her jacket missing, hinting at a sinister struggle. The investigators believed that both Blanco and her killer had arrived at the scene in a vehicle, but heavy rain during the night had erased any tire tracks or crucial forensic evidence. Despite the challenging circumstances, the investigators discovered faint footprints from Blanco and a foreboding clue of footprints of a man wearing size 42 moccasins, providing a faint glimmer of hope in their pursuit of justice for the innocent soul lost. The civil guard notified Blanco's family of the discovery at 3:30 p.m. The news caused commotion in the town of just 12,300 people at the time, with no recent instances of violent crime. At around 7 p.m., 200 people gathered silently before Blanco's home to condemn her murder. Her funeral was held on the 23rd of April and was attended by 2,000 people. In a devastating revelation from the autopsy report, Eva endured a horrifying fate, suffering 19 stab wounds to her back, leading to her tragic demise due to blood loss around 4 a.m. The murder weapon, a Navaja-style knife between 8 and 10 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide, became a terrifying instrument of her torment. The first stab occurred while she was still in a vehicle, while the subsequent ones followed as she desperately tried to run up a slope beside the road. Many of the wounds, particularly those on her ear and the back of her head, were distressingly deemed passionate in nature, adding to the brutality of the crime. Among the horrifying details, the first injury stood out, deep and potentially fatal, even without the additional wounds inflicted later. The tragedy did not end there, as the evidence revealed the heartbreaking violation of Blanco's innocence. The presence of the same man's bodily fluid was discovered in her mouth, genitals, and underwear, testimony to a heinous act that defies comprehension. The discovery of a red fiber in her mouth, identified as common car upholstery by the Catalonia Textile Museum and Documentation Center, confirmed that Blanco had been in a vehicle after her abduction. These shocking details painted a heart-rending picture of the unspeakable pain and suffering endured by this innocent soul in her final moments. Due to the body being found dressed and showing no apparent signs of violence, both the coroner and officers initially speculated that the sexual encounter may have been consensual, leading to a fatal altercation afterward. In stark contrast, Eva's grieving parents firmly believed that their daughter had been abducted, sexually assaulted at knife point, and then murdered to prevent her from seeking justice for the heinous act. The civil guard anticipated that the case would be closed after a short investigation, with their prevailing theory pointing towards a single individual known to Blanco. Allegedly, this person approached her in a car, offering a ride that she accepted, leading them to the secluded construction site, a well-known lover's lane, where the tragic events unfolded. Blanco's ex-boyfriend, residing in Fuente El Saz, who had recently separated from her, became an initial suspect, but he was cleared following police questioning. Subsequently, the focus of the investigation shifted towards adult men known to Blanco's family, individuals that she might have trusted to board their vehicle. As the investigation progressed, the case proved to be more intricate than initially thought, and the likelihood of a stranger's involvement could not be ruled out. Blanco's close acquaintances vehemently maintained that she would never willingly enter a vehicle with someone she did not know, leading them to believe that she had been coerced into the car under duress. Further complicating matters, several residents connected the incident to a suspicious blue vehicle observed in the area at around 12 a.m. One of the car's occupants was described as a fair-haired male, estimated to be roughly 20 years of age. Unfortunately, nobody thought to write down the car's license plate number, which could have been an essential piece of evidence in the investigation. The discovery of an unidentified male bodily fluid on the young woman's body and clothes during the investigation was concealed from Blanco's family and the public, as the officers secretly collected DNA samples from her male relatives and acquaintances to compare with the fluid's DNA. Eva's father's sample was obtained from a discarded cigarette he smoked while drinking coffee and discussing the case with the civil guard officers, while others were surreptitiously taken during unrelated blood alcohol content tests or from the cups and glasses they used in bars. Despite not finding any matches, the civil guard remained steadfast in their belief that the perpetrator was an adult male residing in Al Hit or a nearby town. The pursuit of justice continued in the shadows while the heartbroken family yearned for answers that instead created more questions. 8 months after the tragic incident, Blanco's mother found in her daughter's room 2 hidden notebooks that were labeled 95 to 96 and 96 to 97, Within these pages, Blanco had meticulously chronicled her daily experiences until the day of her murder. The entries predominantly featured the names Eva and Miguel, referring to her ex-boyfriend, written repeatedly in various pen colors. However, just 2 pages before the final one, the names Eva and Miguel were replaced with Eva and 34310. Despite numerous efforts to decipher the significance of the number, all attempts proved futile. Speculations surrounding the number range from it being related to the phone code of Spain, which is 34, and the postal code of the town, which is 110, to yet again being associated with a pager number from a Coca-Cola promotion. At that time, the mystery of the number remained unsolved, leaving Blanco's loved ones and investigators haunted by the enigmatic clue. Upon learning that his DNA had been compared to the fluids found in his daughter's body and that he had been excluded as a suspect, Blanco's father initiated a campaign to rally other residents of Alhiti for voluntary DNA samples to aid in apprehending his daughter's killer. With the support of Mayor Jesus Herrera Fernandez, an official announcement was made in November 1999, urging all male residents over 16 years old, estimated to be 5,000 individuals, to voluntarily provide their hair or saliva samples. However, Spanish judicial organizations unanimously rejected the proposition, deeming it simple-minded, disproportionate, useless, and potentially stigmatizing for those who chose not to provide their DNA without a court order, which was their legal right to do so. They also believed that the culprit would obviously not volunteer to provide their sample. Nevertheless, Blanco's father managed to collect 2,013 samples from the residents of Alhet and nearby towns, depositing them at the local courthouse until further decisions were made. The examining magistrate of the case sought a report from Madrid's chief prosecutor to assess the legal feasibility of such tests. The response that was issued on March 30th, 2000, emphasized that testing should be limited to individuals who could be considered suspicious based on the investigation rather than merely volunteers. Consequently, only samples from 45 people were tested, including 12 relatives from Eva's father's and mother's sides, her acquaintances, and individuals with a prior criminal record, with a particular focus on cases involving sexual misconduct and knife violence. The search for justice persisted amidst the legal complexities and the never-ending determination of those who sought the truth behind Eva's tragic fate. Despite the case hitting a standstill, the homicide group of the Civil Guard remained resolute, never allowing it to fade into oblivion. Over the years, each new member and commander took it upon themselves to revisit the case file, hoping to bring a fresh perspective. The investigation expanded beyond borders, with information sought from various law enforcement agencies, including the Ertzaintza and the FBI. A DNA specialist from the University of Santiago de Compostela re-examined the evidence, revealing that the DNA belonged to a man of non-European descent. Over the years, the number of individuals investigated soared to 1,503, including 208 men from Alget and neighboring towns who voluntarily underwent DNA testing, even encompassing criminals on leave during the time of the murder. A new examining magistrate allowed the opening and checking of the 2013 envelopes containing the names of the volunteers from 1999, but not the testing of all DNA samples. La Sexta's investigative show, La Sexta Columna, aired an episode about the case titled Eva, a Cold Case, on April 26, 2013, that featured interviews with Blanco's loved ones and experts. Psychologist and criminologist Vicente Garrido proposed the theory of a stalker as the likely perpetrator, challenging the Civil Guard's secret boyfriend hypothesis. The lack of defensive wounds suggested threats, and the criminal could be of low intelligence, uneducated, and emotionally immature, given that he was seeking intimacy with a teenager instead of a woman his age. He might have had no family, as they would have noticed his late-night activities, and the possibility of him continuing his crimes elsewhere or being in prison for other attacks was considered. Following the program's broadcast, A woman came forward to authorities reporting that she had seen a suspicious man at the road construction site around 8 a.m. before Eva's body had been found. The man appeared disheveled, walking in the rain without an umbrella, looking like he hadn't slept through the night, and was searching for something before getting into a white Renault 18. The civil guard considered her testimony reliable, as other witnesses had also reported a Renault 18 over the years, which matched the fiber found on Blanco's body. On October 28, 2013, a facial composite of the suspect, made in collaboration with the new witness, was released. The man was described to be between 35 and 40 years old in 1997, around 1.7 to 1.8 meters tall, corpulent with his weight between 75 to 80 kilograms, with short spiky brown hair, a square and hardened face, and dark sunken eyes. He was said to be dressed in a white shirt and a V-neck sweater, and he drove a white Renault 18 with red upholstery. To gather clues, a confidential phone number and email address were set up, resulting in 100 emails received by January 1, 2014. By the end of 2013, a breakthrough in the investigation revealed that the DNA from the fluids pointed to a man of North African descent. The civil guard petitioned the 300 North African men who lived in Algete in 1997 for voluntary samples. A former neighbor of Blanco's, now residing in southern France, shared a remarkable genetic match with the killer, indicating a possible sibling relationship. Further analysis of a brother living in Murcia, who had never lived in Algete, yielded an identical match, leading to a European arrest warrant for the third brother, Ahmed Chel Gersh. On October 1, 2015, Ahmed was apprehended outside his workplace in Villeurbanne, France, in a joint operation involving the civil guard and the French gendarmerie. Ahmed Chel Gersh, born on March 1, 1963, in Taza, Morocco, was 34 years old at the time of the murder. He married a 20-year-old Spanish woman in Madrid in 1989 and obtained Spanish citizenship in the 1990s. They went on to have children, and at the time of Blanco's murder, Chel's wife was 5 months pregnant. They never appeared as residents of Algete since they lived in a caravan provided by Chel's employer at a plant nursery where he worked as a delivery man. Their residence, located next to the Puente del Retamar road, was approximately 4 kilometers away from the crime scene. In 1999, the Chel family moved to France, where, although they continued to be listed as married in Spain, they had separated amicably. Chel remarried to a 24-year-old Moroccan student in Villeurbanne in 2003, settling in a village approximately 20 kilometers from the Swiss border, and went on to have children as well. In France, he worked as a welder for a farm machinery company, but his relationship with co-workers was reportedly troubled. When confronted with the DNA evidence, Chel claimed that 2 unidentified men brought him to Blanco's body and forced him to touch himself over her body. However, his ex-wife contradicted this account by informing journalists that Ahmed had actually gone out with his brothers, as they often did during the weekends. She revealed that one of the brothers had disclosed that they were at the same disco as Blanco and had spoken to her after she argued with her ex-boyfriend. While Blanco initially left the disco with the brothers, she returned inside with her friends around 11 p.m. Surprisingly, Chel's ex-wife stated that neither she nor the brothers had ever been interrogated by the police or the civil guard during the investigation. While she denied any mistreatment by Chel, she later admitted to his aggressive behavior when under the influence of alcohol. Descriptions from former co-workers and female customers portrayed him as unsociable, aggressive when drunk, and inappropriate towards women. Blanco's family had minimal interaction with Chel's brothers at most and had never even met Chel himself. On October 5, 2015, Chel attempted to harm himself in his cell, but agreed to be deported to Spain for trial 2 days later. At the preliminary hearing on October 13, he declined to make a statement but provided a DNA sample. Charged with murder, sexual assault, and illegal detention, he was held in Soto del Rio prison pending trial as the DNA testing confirmed his involvement. On October 19th, Chel's defense unsuccessfully requested his release pending trial, arguing a lack of evidence besides DNA and that the civil guard's hypothesis over the past 18 years suggests that Eva willingly got into a car with someone she knew, engaging in consensual intercourse before her tragic death. Therefore, they believed that there was no sense in charging Chel with sexual assault. Due to the idea of Blanco willingly accepting a ride from the Moroccan, given her friend's assurance that she would never get into a car with a stranger, also made them believe he had no involvement. Chel's lawyer argued that Blanco would never willingly associate with the Moroccan due to alleged neo-Nazi sympathies evidenced in her diaries, linking her to the investigation's early focus on the neo-Nazi group, Bases Autonomous. Chel's first wife sparked another conspiracy theory during an interview with TVE's La Mañana, suggesting the involvement of several people known to the Chel family and hinting at those responsible for the murder. She claimed that Chel returned home between 10 o'clock and 11 p.m. that night, citing her pregnancy as the reason he wouldn't stay out late. According to her, he mentioned being mugged by some boys but didn't report it due to fear. In January 2016, prison psychiatric support lifted the anti-suicide measures from Chel, who claimed he was forced to pleasure himself on Blanco, denying any penetration, but was unable to explain how his bodily fluid was found in her genital area. On January 29, 2016, Chel was discovered dead in his cell, having taken his own life by hanging himself with his shoelaces. The prosecution was officially concluded on February 15, 2016. Eva's family, while finding some closure in knowing who had murdered their daughter, felt disappointed that he did not face the consequences for his wicked deeds, but believed that justice would hopefully be served in the afterlife. Eva Blanco Puig had dreams of becoming an architect and had a passion for drawing. She was an ardent fan of Bon Jovi and also African music. Her sensitivity and sincerity created strong bonds with her friends, and her strong laughter became a defining trait of her personality. She was a responsible and caring older sister, always setting a positive example to her younger sisters. The story of Eva Blanco echoes through time, a story of loss, pain, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As we remember her, we also remember the strength of a community united, seeking answers and closure for the young girl whose life was taken too soon. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mike Williams. Mike Williams was born on October 16, 1969 in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money and Mike, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future, and instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. Mike enrolled in North Florida Christian High School, where he excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise had introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike and Denise attended Florida State University, where they both majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant, and Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working individual, consistently putting in 15-hour days, which led to rapid success in his career. In 1994, he married Denise, and around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The four of them maintained a close and supportive relationship. Mike loved his wife deeply, and was determined to provide for their family to the best of his ability. He had boundless energy and was a high achiever. By the age of 31, Mike Williams had achieved significant success as a real estate appraiser, earning a substantial annual income of nearly $200,000. This allowed the couple to purchase a comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999, they welcomed a daughter into their family. Although Mike was prudent, he had a tendency to engage in risky activities, which prompted his friends to warn Denise about them. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike sought the advice of his trusted friend Brian, who worked as an insurance agent. Brian sold Mike 2 life insurance policies, one worth $250,000 and another worth $500, providing financial protection for his loved ones in the event of an unforeseen disaster. In 2000, Mike's father died, which had a profound impact on Mike. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike turned to his friend Brian for help. Brian assisted Mike in getting a $1 million life insurance policy, adding to an existing policy and bringing the total coverage to nearly $2 million, just 6 months before Mike vanished. On December 16, 2000, their 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. Denise and their daughter stayed at home, expecting Mike to return that day so they could celebrate their anniversary with a planned night out in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. However, Mike didn't come back, prompting Denise to become worried and call her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father drove to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but Mike was missing. The search for Mike began, and after a few hours, a helicopter pilot located the boat drifting approximately 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Notably, Mike's shotgun was still in its case on board, indicating that he was never able to use it. This discovery led to a shift in the operation from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. Locals familiar with the area informed the search team that the location was previously an orchard, known as Stump Field, due to the numerous stumps both above and below the water level, which made navigating motorized boats through the area hazardous. The search team formulated a theory about what might have happened to Mike. He might have collided with a stump while operating his boat, fallen into the water, and become trapped, with his boots filling with water and ultimately causing him to drown. Several agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, participated in the search for Mike. Although they made an extensive and systematic effort, they did not find any signs of him. After a week, the search operation shifted its focus to a body recovery effort. Search teams used probe poles to scan the lake bottom and brought in dogs to assist. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat, but it could not be confirmed as belonging to Mike. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency suggested that Mike might have been attacked by alligators, which could explain why his body was never found, given the lake's known alligator population. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did not find any evidence of a violent death and supported this theory. The search was finally called off after 5 weeks. The day after the authorities gave up searching for Mike, Denise put together a memorial service to pay tribute to him. While it appeared to everyone that Denise had come to terms with losing her husband, Mike's mother was still grappling with the loss. 6 months down the line, in June 2001, a fisherman stumbled upon a sinister find: a pair of boots bobbing on the lake's surface. This prompted a team of divers to scour the lake, and they fished out a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the depths. When they examined the jacket, they found a hunting license with Mike Williams' name and signature tucked away in one of its pockets. The discovery of the hunting jacket and boots raised many questions about Mike Williams' disappearance. The fact that neither item showed signs of an alligator attack and appeared to have been recently placed in the water rather than having been there for 6 months was suspicious. The boots, for example, were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. Despite these inconsistencies, a week later, Denise's attorney requested that the court declare Mike Williams dead, citing the discovery of his belongings as evidence. The attorney suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had likely consumed his body whole. The court granted the motion, and the death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. However, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to accept this conclusion and continued to search for her son. Her efforts caused tension with her former sister-in-law, Denise, who demanded that she stop searching and accept reality. Cheryl's persistence eventually led to a strained relationship between the two women, and Denise followed through on her threat. Undeterred, Cheryl spent the next 3 years fighting to have Mike's disappearance investigated. She made numerous phone calls, posted signs, wrote to the governor, compiled a book of evidence, and contacted reporters. Her persistence finally paid off when she convinced an alligator expert, Matthew Oresco, to get involved. Oresco explained that alligators don't feed during the cold winter months, and that there would always be forensic evidence left behind after an alligator kill. After 3 years, Cheryl Williams finally persuaded law enforcement to abandon the alligator attack theory and launch an official investigation into her son Mike's disappearance. The case was reopened based on newly uncovered facts about alligators' eating habits and evidence gathered from interviews and official data. Former investigator Ronnie Austin revealed that the general consensus among law enforcement agencies was that Mike's death was not accidental. Initially, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency took charge of the case, as Mike was considered a missing hunter. They spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for his body, but neglected to explore other possibilities. Subsequent investigations involved interviewing all those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene. He pointed out several suspicious circumstances. Mike rarely hunted alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area, and the severe storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, yet it was found on the west shore. Furthermore, the boat's motor was not running, despite being full of gasoline. If Mike had fallen out of the boat while driving, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas. Unfortunately, law enforcement realized too late that they were not dealing with a simple drowning. By then, the crime scene had already been compromised by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have been a vital clue was taken by the family without proper verification, and potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester aroused the suspicion of investigators due to their sudden union. The fact that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise raised eyebrows. Further investigation revealed that Denise had received a substantial financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives discovered that Winchester was the one who had sold the policy to Mike. It was also peculiar that Denise, as Mike's wife, showed little interest in the investigation and actively tried to hinder Cheryl's efforts, even going so far as to forbid the grandmother from communicating with her granddaughter. When the newlywed couple was brought in for questioning, their statements failed to shed new light on the case. Brian provided an alibi, stating that he was 60 miles from the lake and at home in bed at the time of Mike's disappearance, which his ex-wife Kathy could corroborate. He claimed that he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that Mike's disappearance was not accidental, and they suspect he was a victim of a crime. However, due to the lack of sufficient evidence, they are unable to bring charges. Despite this, Cheryl Williams persisted, and her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel featuring a story on Mike's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. By that time, Cheryl had become disenchanted with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, convinced that they were either incapable or uninterested in resolving the case. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother, Cheryl, began a campaign to push for a new investigator or special prosecutor in Mike's case. Over 9 years, she wrote a staggering 2,600 letters to Governor Rick Scott, pleading her case. Meanwhile, in 2012, Denise discovered that Brian was cheating on her, and they broke up. The following year, she filed for divorce. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, an appraisal of their former family home was scheduled, which would finally free them from their property disputes. This event marked a turning point in Mike's case. The breakup was acrimonious, with Brian refusing to accept the divorce and Denise refusing to continue the relationship. Their constant fighting was further complicated by the Williams investigation, which seemed to be mocking them. Brian continued to call Denise, but she stopped taking his calls. The stress was taking a toll on him. On August 5, 2016, the day of the scheduled real estate appraisal, Denise left her home to drive to her job at Florida State University. As she chatted with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her car. To her shock, it was Winchester. Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and ordered her to drive straight ahead. He claimed he was forced to take this drastic measure because she had stopped answering his calls. Denise attempted to placate Brian by agreeing with everything he said and promising to give him a chance to salvage their marriage. Naively, Brian believed her. Denise reassured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the car, taking with him the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools. It became evident that Denise had narrowly escaped death. Denise promptly called emergency services, and Brian was swiftly arrested and charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court ruled to detain Brian without bail. Cheryl Williams, hopeful that this development would shed light on her son's disappearance case, expressed optimism. Denise told the New York Daily News that she thought Brian was motivated by their wealth and prayed that he would reveal the truth. In a surprising turn of events, Brian cooperated, negotiating a lenient deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. Brian began his confession by saying that initially, their marriage was going well, but he was a bad husband. He discovered a note in his first wife Kathy's purse, revealing her infidelity, and he sought revenge. They regularly socialized with Denise and Mike, going to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but it wasn't until his girlfriend Kathy cheated on him that he started viewing Denise in a romantic light. The affair between Brian and Denise started in October 1997. What began as a drunken one-night stand at a rock concert soon turned into frequent secret trysts. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever possible. Brian didn't want to divorce Kathy, but Denise made it clear she wouldn't leave her husband. She cared deeply about public opinion and didn't want to risk losing custody of her daughter. Over time, their affair evolved beyond casual sex. Denise and Brian saw themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became apparent they couldn't continue like this. They couldn't bear to be apart. But divorce was off the table for Denise. Her reputation as a pious person had to remain intact. Then, Mike nearly died in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. Denise saw an opportunity to escape her predicament. After making a deal with the prosecutor, Brian will disclose that the year 2000 sparked discussions about Mike and Kathy's death. According to Brian, Denise had wanted to deflect responsibility, placing the blame solely on him and not herself. She had preferred a scenario in which their deaths would be viewed as an accident rather than a murder, thereby allowing her to convince herself that their fate was in God's hands, which would enable her to live with the consequences. After considering various options, Brian and Denise chose to stage a boating accident. They planned the murder to coincide with the maximum payout on Mike's life insurance policy, which was set to expire at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip, claiming he'd found an ideal spot on Lake Semol's shores. Mike thought he'd be back home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Brian told him to bring his wading boots, as they were essential for the trip. Unbeknownst to Mike, Brian had a sinister motive. If he fell overboard wearing wading boots, he'd supposedly drown quickly. The plan was to make Mike's death appear as an accidental drowning. Once they were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat. However, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and started wading through the water towards the shore. Brian panicked, not knowing how to react. Mike began shouting for help, and Brian, desperate and confused, grabbed a shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking of the consequences. Brian's plan had unraveled, and he had to cover his tracks. Time was running out. He should have been home by now, getting ready to go hunting with his father-in-law. Since no one knew he was at the lake with Mike, Brian decided to drive home and pretend he'd overslept. He hoped Kathy would still be asleep. Brian entered the house as quietly as possible. Kathy was asleep, and his phone was on the floor. He went to bed, then called his father-in-law to apologize. Next, Brian created an alibi for himself before hiding the body. Denise was unaware that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to confess, but Denise didn't want to hear it. For her, it was enough that her husband was gone. She preferred to believe that God had prevented Mike from swimming out and let him drown, as Brian had suggested. They promised each other to keep the secret. Denise and Brian rationalized the killing, claiming that Mike's presence made it impossible for them to live together. They downplayed the role of money, saying it was just an added bonus. Brian testified in court that investigators had discovered he had planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license as part of a ruse. His aim was twofold. First, to deter searchers from abandoning the lake, and later, to provide justification for declaring Mike dead, thereby allowing Denise to collect insurance benefits. Impressively, they managed to expedite the typically 5-year recognition process to just 7 months, securing not only Social Security benefits, but also other advantages. As a result, Denise received approximately $2 million on May 8, 2018. Denise Williams faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being an accessory to a felony, all of which carried a life sentence. Despite pleading not guilty to all 3 charges, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2019. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley inherited all of her late father's assets and the insurance money that had been owed to Denise. Denise Williams appealed her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence to implicate her in the actual murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, although the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is currently being held at the Florida Women's Reception Center and will be 78 years old upon her release. Brian Winchester is currently serving the remainder of his sentence at Madison Correctional Institute in Florida, with a scheduled release date of July 30th, 2036, at which point he will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, firmly believes her mother is innocent and attributes responsibility to Brian Winchester. While refusing to discuss the case or her personal life with the media, Ansley remains estranged from her uncle, Nick, and grandmother, Cheryl, who are distressed by their inability to connect with her. Cheryl deeply regrets having lost both her son and her granddaughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Williams. Michelle was raised in Hurst, a suburb of Dallas, Texas, alongside her younger sister Laura. After their mother left to pursue a better life, their father took on the responsibility of raising them. However, he struggled to provide for the family, often relying on unstable construction work and seeking solace in alcohol. In an attempt to make ends meet, Michelle's father devised and carried out schemes to obtain easy money. He would take jobs at factories, intentionally injure himself, and collect insurance payouts. Although this tactic initially worked, it was eventually exposed with the help of CCTV cameras at one of his workplaces, resulting in his arrest and imprisonment. Growing up in an environment filled with deception and manipulation, Michelle became accustomed to a life of dishonesty. She desperately sought escape from this reality, but the lies and deceit had become ingrained in her way of life, making it difficult for her to imagine an alternative. Michelle longed to grow up quickly and leave her impoverished life behind. By the age of 15, she had developed into an attractive young woman, drawing attention from both her peers and older individuals. Michelle soon discovers that she can use her femininity and charm to influence the men around her and get what she wants. As a result, she enters a series of romantic relationships with various men. At 17, Michelle drops out of school and marries 16-year-old Kenneth O'Brien, telling him she's pregnant. Kenneth takes responsibility for his young wife and unborn child, joining the army to provide for them. They move frequently, having 2 more children, but Michelle grows dissatisfied with their nomadic lifestyle and temporary military housing. After 5 years, Michelle leaves Kenneth, citing his infidelity and physical abuse as reasons for the divorce. She returns to her hometown of Hearst, portraying herself as a victim of domestic violence to garner support from relatives and friends. As Michelle rebuilds her life, she reconnects with an old classmate, Brandon, and falls in love. Brandon is smitten with Michelle and happily accepts her 3 children from her previous marriage. They were preparing to get married, but just before the wedding, Brandon became furious with Michelle. He discovered that she had not finalized her divorce from her first husband. Michelle had been afraid to discuss the divorce with her ex-husband due to his abusive behavior, and as a result, she hadn't sent the necessary documents. With the help of a lawyer, they quickly resolved the issue, and they was able to get married in 1994. Initially, their family life was peaceful and routine. Brandon focused on growing his IT company, while Michelle worked as a dental assistant. However, Michelle had bigger aspirations. She began bringing home various dental equipment and supplies. Brandon's concerns grew as he suspected something was wrong. It was later revealed that Michelle had been stealing. Fortunately, they avoided going to trial. However, this incident marked the beginning of Brandon's trust issues with his wife. When neighbors reported that cars frequently visited their house while Brandon was at work, he installed a tape recorder in several rooms. Upon listening to the recordings, he discovered that various men were visiting their home throughout the day. Brandon conducted his own investigation and discovered that Michelle's first marriage ended in divorce due to her repeated infidelities, contradicting her claim that it was her husband's abuse. Upon learning this, Brandon reached his limit and requested a divorce. Enraged that Brandon was the one to initiate the split, Michelle sought revenge while he was away at work. Brandon had a valuable saltwater aquarium with thousands of dollars worth of fish. Michelle destroyed it by pouring Comet into the tank, killing all the fish. But that was not the end of her destructive behavior. Brandon's dog, Domino, was also a victim of Michelle's cruelty. She gave the dog sleeping pills, which led to its death. However, this was only the beginning of Brandon's nightmare. Michelle's actions continued to cause harm, and Brandon eventually learned the truth about her when his marriage was ruined. What Michelle did to Brandon was not an isolated incident. Her treatment of other men was even more shocking. It was later discovered that Michelle's first child was the child of her and John Paul Ray, a high school classmate of hers. Instead of telling John the truth, Michelle convinces Kenneth O'Brien that the child is his and he is forced to marry her. For 13 years, Kenneth believed the child was his child and even paid child support from age 5 to 18. After Michelle's divorce from Brandon, she moved in with John, the father of her first child. They lived together in a common-law marriage for 8 years. However, their relationship ended abruptly when John suspected Michelle of cheating on him. Michelle confirmed she was having an affair, which led to John moving out and leaving most of her belongings behind. She then met Greg Williams, a man with a history of marital failures, having been married twice before and having a daughter named Taylor from his previous marriage to Katie. After Greg and Katie's divorce in 2003, they shared custody of Taylor and maintained a good relationship, which made a formal child support agreement unnecessary. Greg was a successful and generous man who seemed like a perfect partner for Michelle. In 2007, Greg and Michelle had a daughter named Michaela, and they got married a year later. Their marriage seemed like the epitome of the American dream, with plenty of money, children, and love. Michelle appeared to have finally achieved the life she had always wanted. Greg came from a family with strong principles and had achieved success through his own hard work from a young age. He was a sports enthusiast and a black belt in martial arts. Both Greg and Michelle owned guns, which they kept in their home in Keller. Michelle kept a silver .40 caliber pistol in a safe, while Greg stored his black LAA .45 caliber gun, always loaded, in a case under his bedside table. Despite their differences, they was committed to making their marriage work. They regularly hosted birthday parties for their children from previous relationships at their home in Keller. Michelle's adult children frequently hosted barbecues and pool parties at their home, which was always filled with friends. Despite their idyllic suburban life and bright daughter, Michelle and her husband Greg didn't fit the traditional American couple mold. They had met through an online forum for those interested in bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, and their raucous adult gatherings had drawn numerous complaints from their neighbors. On October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., an emergency call was made by a frantic woman, claiming she and her husband had been attacked by an intruder. She reported being injured and her husband shot. Police quickly arrived at the scene and discovered a blaring television and a baby sleeping on the couch inside the house. Michelle's daughter was fast asleep and unharmed during the incident. However, Michelle's behavior raised suspicions among the police officers who arrived at the scene. Despite claiming to have just experienced a burglary and assault, Michelle appeared remarkably calm and composed. Her hair was styled, and she was fully dressed, which seemed inconsistent with her story. The police soon cordoned off the entire gated community and thoroughly searched the home. As the investigation progressed, Michelle was taken to the Keller Township Police Station for further questioning. Over several hours of interrogation, her account of the events began to unravel. Michelle initially claimed that an intruder, dressed in black, had struck her on the head with a wrench. She alleged that she fell to the ground but remained conscious and heard a gunshot. According to her, the intruder then fled through the back door. However, the evidence at the scene contradicted her story. Greg Williams, the victim, was found shot in the head while lying in bed. A .45 caliber handgun and a wrench were discovered near the back door, but the circumstances suggested that Michelle's account was not entirely credible. The investigation found no fingerprints on the weapons and no signs of forced entry. The family's valuables, including a large sum of cash, were left untouched. Security footage revealed that the only car to enter the gated community before the crime belonged to a newspaper delivery person. Michelle attempted to mislead the police by fabricating a story about the attack. She even went so far as to injure herself with a wrench and stage the scene. However, detectives noticed inconsistencies in her account. The discovery of the gun used in the crime, devoid of fingerprints, further raised suspicions. The final discrepancy was the untouched $20,000 in cash, which Michelle couldn't explain. While Michelle was unable to provide a reason for why her husband, a successful businessman and devoted father, would take his own life, she was able to justify her own actions. Michelle claimed she wanted to protect their young daughter from the painful truth about her father's death. She told the police that she had cleaned the gun and washed her husband Greg's hands to remove fingerprints, and then staged a fake home invasion before calling for help. This explanation seemed strange, but it explained why no evidence of an intruder was found. Michelle also admitted to using bleach to clean up the crime scene and hitting herself in the face with a wrench to make the attack look more believable. From the start, the police in Keller suspected that Michelle's story was not true, but at the time, they did not have any physical evidence that linked her to the crime. Michelle was arrested for lying to the police, but she was later released. Around 5 p.m. on the day of her husband's murder, Michelle visited her sister Laura's home. During the evening, Michelle cried occasionally, but her sister felt that Michelle's tears seemed insincere. Notably, Michelle didn't mention her late husband's name once. The next morning, when questioned by police, Michelle appeared to be in a great mood. She was well-dressed, had styled her hair, and was wearing makeup. Despite the ongoing investigation into her husband's death, Michelle went out for breakfast at a popular restaurant. As investigators struggled to find a motive and credible evidence, Michelle inadvertently provided them with both. During her initial interrogation, Michelle claimed she wasn't interested in money. However, her actions after Greg's death told a different story. She quickly began selling off assets from their family businesses and spending large sums of money. Michelle had been cashing checks through her husband Greg's IT company, but the exact amount is unknown. It is likely that the amount was substantial. After selling the Blueberries frozen yogurt store in Keller, Michelle made a crucial mistake. She attempted to claim the payout on Greg's life insurance policy, for which she was the sole beneficiary. The policy was taken out on August 12, 2011, nearly 2 months before Greg's death. However, Michelle overlooked a key detail: the policy did not cover Greg's death since he had taken his own life. As a result, the insurance company denied her the $60,000 payout, which was the primary motive for the crime. Later, another financial irregularity came to light that raised suspicions about Michelle. It was discovered that she had used falsified financial documents to secure a mortgage loan for the house that she and Greg were planning to buy before his death. The account numbers had been intentionally altered, and the lender did not immediately detect the elaborate scheme. Following Greg's death, Michelle canceled a meeting with the mortgage company, and the fake account went undiscussed until it caught the attention of the police. Despite the scrutiny, Michelle felt confident in her ability to avoid consequences and wrote a check for $188,000 to attorney Kenneth Wincorn. She then took a week-long vacation to Grapevine with her children. During a 3-month investigation into Greg Williams' death, police uncovered a web of deceit spun by his wife, Michelle. An autopsy revealed that Greg was shot from a distance of 12 to 18 inches. A toxicology report also showed that Greg had a large amount of sleeping pills in his system at the time of his death. Further investigation found no evidence of a break-in or assault on the house. Instead, police determined that Michelle had sedated her husband, turned up the TV volume, and shot him from close range. Their daughter was asleep in her room and did not hear the shooting. On November 3, 2011, the Tarrant County Medical Examiner officially ruled Greg's death a homicide. Michelle Williams was arrested on January 9 while on her way to a fitness center. She was charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and providing a false statement to police. As the sole witness and suspect, Michelle's bail was set at $522,000. However, she spent only a week in custody before being released on a reduced bail of $85,000. Michelle walked out of jail wearing gym clothes and a GPS monitor, accompanied by her new attorney, Kenneth Wincorn. However, this news infuriated Kathy, Greg's first wife, as she had paid Wincorn with money from Greg's estate, which she believed should not be used to defend Michelle, who was accused of killing Greg. According to online court records, Kenneth Wincorn's law firm had handled Greg and his ex-wife Kathy's divorce in 2003, and his name appeared on documents related to the custody agreement for their daughter Taylor in 2008. However, Wincorn later provided evidence showing his company, rather than him personally, had handled Greg's divorce case, which cleared him of the accusations that he had colluded with Michelle. Kenneth Wincorn learned of Greg's murder from an IT company employee. He described the news as shocking. Later, Michelle sought his help after her attempt to profit from Greg's death failed. Michelle changed her name to Shelley and presented herself as a fitness guru on Facebook. She publicly revealed her relationship with Gene Wallace, a friend of her oldest son who is nearly 15 years younger than her. Shelley and Gene opened a fitness club in Bedford and actively promoted it online. Michelle spent the next few months attending court hearings, enjoying her new relationship, and participating in fitness classes while wearing a GPS tracking ankle bracelet. Her courtroom attire often included miniskirts, knee-length boots, and revealing blouses. According to Greg's ex-wife Kathy, Michelle never showed any signs of mourning Greg's death. Rob Conover, a friend of Greg's for over 20 years, attended many of Michelle's hearings. He observed how Michelle skillfully manipulated police officers, portraying herself as an innocent woman in need of protection. On October 9, 2013, 45-year-old Michelle took a plea deal, pleading guilty to tampering with evidence and deadly conduct. Michelle Williams has been sentenced to 18 years in prison for tampering with evidence and engaging in deadly, dangerous conduct. This is a third-degree felony that is only recognized in a few states. Initially, Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and her husband Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. The trial of Michelle Williams, also known as Keller's Black Widow, has begun. Prosecutors allege that she intentionally targeted her husband in 2011 to collect on his substantial life insurance policy. They described the crime as a clearly planned scheme motivated by greed. According to prosecutors, Michelle drugged her husband with sleeping pills and then shot him in the head to collect the insurance payout. Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. In a statement, Michelle's attorney, Kenneth Wincorn, highlighted the challenges in the case due to the thoroughly cleaned crime scene. If the jury finds that Michelle tampered with evidence and cleaned up the crime scene, she could receive a life sentence. During the trial, prosecutors stated that in the hours preceding the violent death, Greg Williams had a heated argument with his wife over financial issues. The altercation escalated to the point where he slapped her for spending a significant amount of money intended for a house down payment. In contrast, Michelle Williams' defense team claimed that Greg Williams took his own life. Defense attorney Clay Graham added that Greg Williams frequently struggled with depression and was known to use sedatives and steroids regularly. Michelle Williams' husband, Greg, was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Michelle stated that she attempted to cover up the incident to shield her 4-year-old daughter from the truth. Throughout the court hearings, Michelle maintained a composed appearance but showed some emotional response when presented with photographs of her deceased husband. Michelle planned to blame Greg's ex-wife for the crime, claiming it was due to custody disputes. However, this plan was flawed as there were no actual disputes. Michelle's adult son testified against her, revealing she had asked him to assist in framing Greg's ex-wife. After many hours of deliberation, the jury found Michelle guilty of tampering with physical evidence, a felony offense. She received a harsh sentence, 60 years in prison, with the stipulation that she must serve at least 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. Michelle has not expressed remorse for her actions and continues to evade full responsibility for her crimes. She is currently serving her time at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, northeastern Mexico, to parents Maria del Seguro Sagan and Manuel Perez. She was the second of 3 children. Abril demonstrated exceptional mathematical and entrepreneurial abilities from a young age. She was a dedicated reader and consistently ranked as the top student in her class. As a teenager, Abril prioritized achieving financial independence, showcasing remarkable discipline and effective time management skills. Following high school, Abril attended the most prestigious university in New Leon, where she obtained a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her peers described her as intelligent, focused, and ambitious, while also being kind, cheerful, and always willing to assist others. After graduating, Abril secured a position in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. She later transitioned into digital sales, a rapidly expanding field, and discovered her true passion. Abril quickly rose through the ranks and became the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was a young, beautiful, and successful woman who was rapidly achieving her life goals. She had built a stellar career, supported her family, and had big plans for the future. However, her personal life was still unfulfilled, which worried her loved ones. Despite this, Abril was confident that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. But she had no idea how her future marriage to the seemingly perfect man would turn out. That man was Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, whom she met in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. Juan Carlos was just 3 years older than Abril and shared her ambitious drive, which drew her to him. He, in turn, was captivated by her stunning looks, charming personality, kind heart, bright smile, sharp intellect, and remarkable determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious science and technology university, where he excelled in economics and trade. He then continued his studies at Harvard University in the United States. After returning to Mexico, he built a successful career in the emerging field of e-commerce. Juan Carlos and Abril met at a conference on the latest financial technologies. Their companies collaborated on several projects, allowing them to cross paths multiple times. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized he had developed feelings for Abril, who was intelligent and beautiful. He obtained her phone number through mutual acquaintances and asked her out on a date. Abril was also attracted to Juan Carlos, finding him to be educated, elegant, and engaging in conversation on a wide range of topics. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that point, they had both achieved significant success in their careers and were working on developing online stores, a field with great potential. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, inspiring envy and admiration from those around them. However, surface of their perfect family, there were some dark secrets. It wasn't until 2001, 3 years after their wedding, that they had their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. The arrival of their child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband appeared happy, showing their newborn daughter love and admiration. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son, named Juan Carlos Jr., after his father. 2 more years passed, and the family had another child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril hardly took any time off work and managed to balance parenting with career advancement. She made homemade meals, helped with schoolwork, took the children to sports activities, and aimed to be both a perfect mother and their best friend. Outwardly, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, with 3 lovely children, and everything they could want. However, their home life remained a secret, even from their closest relatives, for a long time. In the early years of their relationship, Juan Carlos revealed his true personality to Abril. He had a short temper, was aggressive, and had a tendency to be overly harsh, refusing to compromise and insisting that everything be done his way. Initially, Abril was in love and believed that as time passed, Juan Carlos's rough edges would smooth out. Their shared projects brought them together, and their collaboration led to significant accomplishments, including financial success. However, as the years went by, Juan Carlos's irritability grew, and verbal arguments escalated into physical confrontations. Following the birth of their first daughter, he made a brief effort to control his emotions, but this change was short-lived. A similar attempt was made after the birth of their eldest son, but by the time their third child arrived, Juan Carlos no longer made any effort to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos frequently directed his anger and frustration at Abril and disregarding her emotional well-being. He would insult and belittle her, the mother of his children, and seemed to feel better when she cried. He regularly physically harmed her, doing so in a way that left no visible marks, allowing her to hide the bruises with clothing or makeup. His goal was to maintain his reputation as a model family man, loving husband, and father. Abril kept quiet about the abuse for years, not even telling her sister and mother about the ongoing situation. She earned a good income and could have raised the children on her own, providing them with a good education and stable upbringing. However, her husband was wealthy and influential, and she knew he could use the courts to take the children away from her. Knowing Juan Carlos's true nature, Abril couldn't bear the thought of her children being left alone with him, as she considered him a monster capable of anything. When the family situation reached a boiling point, what was once considered an ideal household now raised suspicions that something was terribly wrong. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed and visibly struggling. She had lost weight, slept poorly, and frequently had bruises on her face and body that were becoming harder to hide and explain. Despite this, Juan Carlos appeared calm and confident in public, pretending that everything was fine. He played the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with Abril politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a menacing figure. Despite loved ones urging Abril to divorce him, she insisted that everything was fine and that she could handle the problems with her husband on her own. 2014 marked the peak of Juan Carlos' career when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in his field. Following this promotion, his family relocated to Mexico City, settling into a large house in one of the capital's upscale neighborhoods. Their children began attending an elite private school. Abril had genuinely hoped that this change of environment would improve their relationship. However, contrary to her expectations, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos often persisted in physically and verbally abusing his wife in front of their children. He increasingly accused her of infidelity without any basis for his claims. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would resort to physical violence, insisting he would find evidence of her supposed disloyalty. Juan Carlos monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and when finding no evidence, he hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. For 4 years, she tried every possible way to save her marriage. Despite her efforts, her husband's behavior became increasingly unbearable, creating a never-ending nightmare for her. To outsiders, however, their union appeared happy and successful, even enviable, due to her husband's wealth, influence, and seemingly caring nature. In 2018, the Juan Carlos and Abril visited to the Abril's family. During this trip, Juan Carlos treated his wife poorly in front of her parents, who were deeply disturbed by what they saw. This incident marked a turning point for Abril, and she realized that she could no longer continue living this way. She informed her husband that she would file for divorce as soon as they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos became enraged, grabbed her throat, and squeezed it so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Fortunately, her mother, Maria del Soro, entered the room and raised the alarm, preventing a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce and moved from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not keep her safe from her husband's abuse. On January 4th, while Abril was still asleep, her husband entered the room holding a baseball bat. He struck her hard on the head and was about to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but she managed to roll off the bed just in time, saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room, having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body, while the eldest son took the bat away from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, as Abril needed medical attention. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow that required stitches. After Abril and their sons left the house, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to discuss the situation and asked for help in resolving the marital conflict. However, Juan Carlos also posted on social media, accusing his wife of betraying him by being unfaithful and planning to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to claim all their jointly acquired assets. Additionally, Juan Carlos claimed that Abril had stolen all the money from their home safe and had injured him with a knife when he tried to stop her. He posted photos of a bloodied knife and brown stains on the floor as evidence. However, the blood on the floor actually belonged to Abril from her own injury, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite the fabrication, Juan Carlos's friends believed his story and actively shared and reposted his account on their social media pages, calling for widespread attention to this supposedly egregious case. Juan Carlos's attempt to kill Abril prompted her to take swift action. From her hospital bed, she filed a police report against him, accusing him of trying to take her life. After her release from the hospital, Abril packed up her two young sons and left the family home. Her oldest child, who was attending college in a nearby city, also condemned his father's violent actions. While waiting for justice, she started providing online support and consultations to women who were going through similar experiences. She also planned to open a center that would offer psychological and legal help to victims of domestic violence who had been failed by the justice system. It wasn't until 8.5 months after the incident, in September 2019, that Juan Carlos was finally arrested and charged with inflicting bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was put in jail, where he spent over a month, but he managed to appeal the decision to keep him in detention before his trial. As a result, he was released from jail by November of that year. Judge Federo presided over the case, reclassifying it and ordering a new trial. During the trial, Abril's medical records and photos were not presented as evidence. Her and her son's testimonies were deemed insufficient to detain Juan Carlos because he claimed Abril was manipulating their children against him. The judge released Juan Carlos, concluding his actions didn't pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and terrified when Juan Carlos was released. She suspected he had bribed his way to freedom, putting her and their children in danger. She wrote to the judge, expressing her fear, but it had no immediate effect. Juan Carlos then initiated a custody battle, forcing Abril to return to Mexico City with their sons to attend court hearings. Abril arrived in Mexico City on November 25th with her children. She had a legitimate fear of her longtime partner and wanted to avoid him. To minimize the risk of an encounter, she planned to leave the city immediately after a court hearing that day. In fact, she had already bought the plane ticket, but Juan Carlos already knew that. After the court session, Abril, her sons, and their lawyer got into a car headed to the airport. However, they never made it to their destination. At a traffic light, a motorcyclist suddenly pulled up next to their car, drew a handgun, and fired 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. The attacker then quickly fled the scene. A shooting occurred, and one of the bullets grazed the younger son, who was sitting in the back seat. Fortunately, none of the children were seriously injured. However, the injured Abril was rushed to the nearest hospital where doctors fought to save her life for more than 6 hours. Unfortunately, due to severe injuries and significant blood loss, they were unable to save her. Abril passed away that evening. The victim's family, including her parents, brother, and sister, immediately flew to the capital and urged authorities to arrest Juan Carlos, whom they believed was behind the brutal act. However, law enforcement had a different perspective, stating that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to determine the motive behind the attack. They also noted that they could not confirm with certainty that the shooting was ordered by Juan Carlos. The tragic case of murder sparked widespread outrage and public debate. Abril's family successfully drew attention to the case, highlighting numerous instances where men had attempted to kill women but escaped punishment. In response to the public outcry, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into the suspect, Juan Carlos Sanchez, and also examined the actions of the judges who had previously released him. The judges who had released Juan Carlos could face consequences for their role in the Abril death if his guilt was proven. Juan Carlos took to social media to demand justice for his former wife's murder. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, accused him of cruelty and shared photos of her mother's hospitalization after Juan Carlos had attacked her with a bat, contradicting her father's claims that he would never harm her mother. Despite the media attention surrounding the case, he was initially allowed to remain free during the investigation. However, he was required to check in with the police weekly and was placed under a restraining order. When he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest for violating the order. As expected, Juan Carlos could not be found, and it was later discovered that he had used his wealth and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Juan Carlos as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was subsequently declared wanted worldwide. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to locate criminals in Abril's assassination. Surveillance footage from street cameras revealed that the motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone. Two vehicles were seen following the car carrying Abril. The motorcyclist appeared to be in constant communication with the occupants of these vehicles, receiving directions and instructions. After several months of investigation, some of the participants were identified, and on March 5, 2020, two suspects were arrested in connection with the case. To everyone's surprise, the suspects did not resist arrest and quickly began cooperating with authorities, hoping to receive lighter sentences. It was confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime, and he had paid a significant amount of money to individuals who were directly involved in the crime. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the getaway cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. It was discovered that while Juan Carlos was in prison, he had hired two experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards. One of these bodyguards was released from prison a week before Juan Carlos, and the other was released several days after him. After being released from prison, Juan Carlos reconnected with his accomplices and asked them to recruit trustworthy individuals to help carry out the murder of a person in exchange for a large sum of money. Once all participants were in place, Juan Carlos provided detailed instructions about the intended victim's travel schedule and mode of transportation. However, luring his former wife to Mexico City proved to be a challenge. Juan Carlos used coercion, threatening to take their children unless she attended a court appearance. Despite attending the court date, his ex-wife intended to return to Monterrey on the same day, which Juan Carlos knew about through his sources. 3 more individuals involved in the conspiracy were arrested in late October 2020. Initially, they were taken into custody on suspicion of distributing controlled substances, but further investigation at the police station revealed their potential connection to the high-profile crime. The arrested individuals were part of a major drug trafficking gang led by Balto, who had previously served time with Juan Carlos and offered him protection. In exchange for a significant reward, Balto agreed to help Juan Carlos eliminate his ex-wife. A few weeks later, in November 2020, Maldonado, an individual involved in the case, was also arrested. During his testimony, he confirmed that Juan Carlos had sought out reliable individuals to kill his ex-wife and that he had agreed to assist in exchange for a substantial reward. The investigation confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime. His earlier attack on Abril with a stick was reclassified as an attempted murder. As a result, the court issued an arrest warrant for Juan Carlos on charges of femicide. However, his location remained unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining suspects involved in the murder of Abril were apprehended. One of them was already serving time for a separate crime. The searches also led to the discovery of the gun used to kill Abril. In total, 9 individuals linked to the same criminal organization were detained, with 7 of them directly involved in the pursuit and shooting of Abril. More than 4 years after the Abril murder, the mastermind behind the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still on the run and his location is unknown. Meanwhile, the man who fired the fatal shot has been convicted and sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 accomplices who participated in the car chase and coordinated with the shooter have each been sentenced to 50 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Patrick de la Cerda. Patrick de la Cerda was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a city known for its picturesque metropolitan area. His father, Max Dira, was a native of Spain, while his mother, Patricia Ranza, was born and raised in France before moving to the United States in the 1980s, where she met and married Max. Patrick grew up in a warm family environment where he was surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. He was a kind, intelligent, and sociable person who excelled in school and had a large circle of friends. From a young age, Patrick was very close to his parents, who prioritized his education and well-being, providing him with every opportunity to grow into a capable and responsible individual. Patrick's father was a dedicated and skilled professional in the construction industry. Although the family was not wealthy, they were considered well off by the standards of the big city. After completing high school, Patrick decided to follow in his father's footsteps and pursue a degree in construction. However, during his time at university, his parents made the difficult decision to divorce after nearly 25 years of marriage. The divorce of Patrick's parents was a quiet and peaceful one, with no scandals or disputes over property. After the separation, his mother moved to Deltona, a small town on the east coast of the state, where she eventually remarried. Patrick, on the other hand, chose to stay with his father in Miami, where they worked together in the construction industry and were highly respected. Despite the divorce, the family remained very close, and all members maintained a friendly relationship with one another. The family continued to stay in touch, regularly calling and communicating with each other. They were always willing to lend a helping hand when needed. Patrick often visited his mother in Deltona and shared with her details of his life, including his relationships and romantic interests. With his French and Spanish heritage, Patrick had grown up to be a charming and attractive young man, which helped him win over women at a relatively young age. Patrick grew up in a family that valued strong relationships, so he never sought casual flings. Instead, he dreams of finding lasting love, living peacefully, and building a lifelong family with someone special. He created a profile on a popular dating website at the suggestion of a friend, but he didn't have high hopes of actually meeting his soul mate on the dating website. One June evening in 2017, Patrick half-heartedly scrolled through profiles of women on the site. Then, he came across a photo that caught his attention, a stunning brunette with an unforgettable appearance, big, expressive eyes, and a charming smile. Patrick was immediately smitten and decided to send her a message. She replied, much to his delight, and they easily fell into a comfortable conversation. Jessica Devnani was born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking. Following graduation, she landed a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Around that time, she met a handsome young man online. They quickly hit it off, exchanging messages and eventually phone numbers. They had long conversations every day, creating a deep emotional bond and strong trust. As their online friendship grew, they decided to meet in person. Since they lived in different parts of the state, they chose a meetup spot roughly equidistant from each other. On their first date, Patrick knew he had found the person he had been searching for, and he didn't want to let her go. Jessica felt the same way about him. However, Jessica was slightly taken aback by their age difference. She was 4 years older than Patrick. After their date, on his way home, Patrick called his mother to tell her what happened. They had been in a long-distance relationship for months, which was becoming increasingly difficult. Due to the distance between them, they could only see each other on weekends, and even then, they had to meet at a location convenient for both of them. Usually, they will rent a cozy hotel room in a secluded spot and use the time to enjoy quality time together. However, by Sunday night, they would have to return to their respective homes, as they had work commitments on Monday mornings. In December 2017, Patrick made a significant decision. He relocated to Delton, where his mother lived, in order to be nearer to his girlfriend. He purchased a house in a quiet neighborhood and began making repairs to create a welcoming home for Jessica. Although she couldn't move right away because of work, but they made plans to get together again and have a housewarming party in early spring. They had a special celebration planned on New Year's Eve. To surprise Jessica, Patrick set up a fireworks display in the backyard, getting down on one knee to make his romantic proposal as they gazed up at the festive lights. Patrick got down on one knee, held out a box with a ring, and asked Jessica the most important question of all: would she become his wife? Overjoyed, Jessica happily agreed. Patrick had been looking for an engagement ring for a long time, but in jewelry stores there was no ring beautiful and delicate enough for the occasion. He chose the best auction possible to propose before the new year, but he also had a custom ring made from a jewelry shop, designed by himself. Patrick's engagement was just 2 months old, and the wedding preparations were well underway. His choice of partner had been approved by their parents, and they was overjoyed as they prepared to start a new life together. They had plans for a grand celebration, either in Miami on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean or in France, where the groom's mother was from, on February 27, 2018. On that day, Patrick's father, Max, received a call from a courier while he was at work. The delivery man explained that Patrick's order has been delivered, but Patrick did not answer the door or answer the phone. Max was taken aback by Patrick's unexpected actions, which immediately raised his level of concern. Since Max was tied up at work and couldn't go check on Patrick, Max asked his future daughter-in-law to go instead. Patrick's father called Jessica in a panicked tone, saying he couldn't reach his son. Jessica had been trying to contact Patrick all morning, but he wasn't responding to her calls or messages. When she shared this with Patrick's father, Max, he feared the worst. Jessica immediately dropped everything and rushed to Patrick's house. When she arrived, she saw his car in the driveway, indicating he was still at home. Using her own key, she entered the yard and called out to Patrick, but there was no response. Jessica carefully opened the front door and was met with a horrific sight. Patrick was lying in a pool of blood, showing no signs of life. She quickly called emergency services, but the paramedics were unable to save Patrick and declared him dead at the scene. When the police arrived, Jessica was overcome with grief, sobbing in the backyard where Patrick had proposed to her just 2 months earlier. An officer spoke to her, and she raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his. She claimed to know who was accountable for Patrick's murder, naming her wealthy ex-boyfriend as the culprit. To comprehend this complex case and identify potential suspects, it's essential to revisit the past when Patrick first met Jessica. At that time, Jessica was in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a wealthy businessman who owned an investment fund. She met Gregory during her student years, and he was 20 years her senior. Gregory showered Jessica with expensive gifts and took her on lavish vacations, eventually winning her affection. Jessica thought she had found her soulmate, but soon she began to notice some disturbing patterns in her ex-boyfriend Gregory's behavior. He was extremely controlling, constantly monitoring her movements and interactions with others. If she had an admirer, Gregory would quickly get rid of them through threats and intimidation. Meanwhile, he kept his own life a mystery, sharing very little about himself with Jessica. Their relationship lasted nearly 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. They only spent time together or went on vacation when he wanted to, and he rarely invited her to his home. Gregory claimed he was too busy, but Jessica longed for a normal family life and children. However, every time she brought it up, Gregory would say it wasn't the right time. When Jessica tried to end the relationship, Gregory proposed to her with a ring, and she accepted. However, nothing changed. They still lived apart and only saw each other when Gregory wanted to. One day, Gregory was in a car accident and ended up in the hospital. When Jessica rushed to his side, she decided to stop by his house to pick up some things for him. That's when she encountered a woman she had never seen before. Instead of introducing herself, the stranger asked Jessica who she was. Jessica showed her the ring on her hand and that she was the landlord's fiancée. Jessica later found out that Gregory was married to someone else, Diora Sanchez Bender. Devastated, Jessica immediately broke off the relationship. However, Gregory really wanted to keep her, begging for forgiveness and promising to divorce his wife and marry Jessica in the future. Jessica eventually gave in and continued the affair, but as time went on, nothing changed, and Jessica became exhausted. Jessica changed her life and started dating someone new, Patrick, through a dating website. She then ended her relationship with Gregory and informed him that it was over. But Gregory did not give up and started to do worse things. Gregory asked Jessica to reconsider their relationship. He then became aggressive, and he resorted to threatening and harassing her. Realizing that Jessica had moved on, Gregory turned to private investigators to hack into her online accounts and find out who she was talking to. He soon discovered Patrick's identity and contact information. Then, Gregory started sending threatening messages to Patrick. Patrick received threatening messages from Gregory, Jessica's ex-boyfriend, who demanded that Patrick end his relationship with Jessica, referring to her as his fiancée. After receiving the threats, Patrick remained calm because he thought they would not come true. However, Jessica is scared because she knows Gregory's aggressive nature and that he has a large collection of weapons. She suggested breaking up with Patrick to avoid any potential harm, but Patrick refused. They decided to report the incidents to the police, providing evidence of Gregory's stalking and threats. They obtained a restraining order, which prohibited Gregory from approaching or contacting them. Additionally, Gregory was required to surrender his firearms. For a while, the situation seemed to calm down, and they thought they had finally found peace. Nevertheless, Jessica convinced Patrick to install CCTV cameras around and inside their home, fearing that Gregory might violate the restraining order. Let's go back to the events of February 27, 2018. During the initial crime scene inspection, investigators quickly ruled out robbery as a motive. Instead, they believed the murder was personally motivated, given the nature of Patrick's injuries, which suggested a deep-seated hatred. Patrick, 25 years old, had 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. The body also showed signs of a fall from a ladder. The body was found on the floor between the front door and the stairs leading to the second floor. Investigators theorized that the killer likely snuck into the house and waited for the owner, Patrick, on the second floor. When Patrick entered the house and began to climb the stairs, the killer ambushed him, shooting him in the thigh. As Patrick rolled down the stairs, the killer followed, shooting him in the chest and then twice in the head. The murder weapon, a rare pistol, was not recovered, but several shell casings were found at the crime scene. The police found 3 casings at the scene, but a 4th one was missing. This led investigators to suspect that the killer might have taken it as a souvenir. The initial suspect was Patrick's neighbor, a U.S. Army veteran who had a history of conflict with Patrick. The veteran had been involved in combat and had suffered a severe head injury, which led to the development of a mental disorder. The veteran was skilled with firearms and had access to rare guns. In a previous incident, the veteran had mistakenly shot at his neighbor, thinking he was a burglar. After his release, the veteran continued to harass the victim, accusing him of being a spy and threatening to expose him. The investigation initially centered around the veteran with a history of mental health issues, as his unusual behavior and mindset suggested a possible motive for the crime. Although he truly hated Patrick, he still had an alibi for the time of the murder, confirmed by many witnesses. As the police looked for evidence and attempted to provoke a response from the perpetrator, it became clear that the crime was not a robbery gone, as the house was undisturbed and valuables remained untouched. The only items missing were the hard drives containing video surveillance footage, making it impossible to identify who entered and left the house that day. Furthermore, no evidence was found at the crime scene. Forensic experts were unable to find a single fingerprint, shoe print, or DNA trace, suggesting that the murder was meticulously planned and executed. Although the investigation suspected Gregory's involvement, it seemed likely that he would escape justice due to the lack of concrete evidence. The police asked Jessica to help them with a secret plan to catch her ex-boyfriend, Gregory, off guard. She agreed to make the call, and as the police had hoped, Gregory answered. Jessica tried to lure him into a conversation, but it quickly became apparent that he had anticipated the trap and was not falling for it. Gregory seemed unflappable as Jessica confronted him about Patrick's death. When she accused him directly, he acted shocked and even offered her his condolences. Despite her best efforts to get him to lose his cool, he didn't give away any incriminating information. In the end, the police didn't have enough evidence to hold or question Gregory, so he remained at large, abiding by the terms of a restraining order. He appeared to have already distanced himself from Jessica, makes gathering evidence more difficult. As the police investigation stagnated due to lack of evidence, Diora Sanchez, Gregory's wife, called to reveal she had vital information about Patrick's death. Upon arrival at the police station, Diora told investigators about discovering a cryptic notebook in Gregory's office just days before the crime occurred. Upon flipping through the notebook's pages, Diora stumbled upon an entry containing an address she didn't recognize, accompanied by a series of cryptic digits that appeared to be a code. Diora had previously ignored some suspicious sketches made by Gregory, but when she saw a news report about a young man's murder, she realized the significance of those sketches. The crime scene's layout matched the drawings Gregory had made. Diora informed the investigators, who then obtained a search warrant for Gregory's house. Upon searching, the police found a mysterious notebook in Gregory's office, but several key pages were missing. They later discovered those pages in a trash can, carelessly discarded after being ripped out and crumpled. The pages contained a detailed plan of the crime, including turning off the victim's phone, wearing gloves, and using a special lubricant on shoes to avoid leaving footprints. The records also revealed that Gregory had been stalking the victim, Patrick, and knew his daily routine, including the time he returned home. Furthermore, Gregory knew the location of surveillance cameras in and around Patrick's house, suggesting this was a carefully planned and executed crime. In addition to committing the crime, Gregory took steps to cover his tracks by disposing of the weapon, clothes, shoes, and gloves. However, he failed to destroy his own records, which later incriminated him. Furthermore, his wife's curiosity ultimately worked against him. A shell casing was discovered in a cigar box, which was meant to be taken as a trophy by the gunman. Forensic analysis confirmed that the casing matched the one found at the crime scene. The trial of Gregory posed a challenge due to the lack of direct evidence. Although the accumulated evidence was sufficient to arrest him, it was largely circumstantial. Since the crime weapon was never recovered, there was no definitive proof that Gregory was at the victim's house on the day of the crime. Moreover, there were no eyewitnesses to testify against him. The trial, which began in May 2021, more than 3 years after the crime, was heavily influenced by the skilled lawyers Gregory hired. He appeared confident and seemed to believe he would evade punishment. A crucial witness, Jessica, provided detailed testimony about her long-term relationship with Gregory, including his marital status, her attempts to break up with him, and the subsequent harassment and threats he made against her and Patrick. Jessica presented evidence of her conversations with Gregory, including screenshots of their conversations and their phone records. However, Gregory's lawyers countered by blaming Jessica, claiming that she was responsible for Gregory's behavior. They claimed that Jessica had started a new relationship with Patrick while still involved with Gregory, and that she had hurt his self-esteem. The defense downplayed the significance of the written plans for the murder, describing them as mere fantasies of a hurt man seeking revenge on his rival. They argued that Gregory never acted on these plans and therefore did not leave any evidence at the crime scene. Additionally, the lawyers claimed that the search of Gregory's home was conducted illegally and with procedural errors, suggesting that the shell casing found there could have been planted. The crime weapon was never found, and Jessica's identification of the gun model was uncertain. She had previously seen a similar gun in her boyfriend's collection, but she wasn't familiar with firearms and could have been mistaken. The defendant's ex-wife, Diora Sanchez, was called to testify. During her testimony, the defendant, Gregory, unexpectedly professed his love for Diora. This declaration seemed to affect Diora, and her testimony became unclear. Diora claimed to have forgotten some details and ultimately stated that she doubted Gregory's capability for murder, given their long history together. Despite the defense's efforts to challenge the search of Gregory's home and the lack of direct evidence, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. Gregory was given a life sentence with no possibility of parole. As the judge read out the sentence, the defendant fixed Jessica with an intense stare, not blinking once. His glare made her feel nauseous. Jessica sat next to Patrick's mother and suddenly burst into uncontrollable sobs, finding it hard to breathe. Despite multiple attempts by Gregory's lawyers to appeal the verdict, all their efforts were unsuccessful. The case attracted public attention, with many outraged that a wealthy businessman had brutally murdered a working-class man and attempted to escape justice. Patrick's story was widely reported in the press, and Gregory remains in prison to this day. Jessica Dira said she is grateful that justice has been served, and Patrick's memory will always live on in her. She wears the engagement ring he gave her and a special piece of jewelry he had intended to give her but never got the chance. Jessica remains close to Patrick's parents, who have welcomed her into their family as one of their own. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison. Brianna Zunino Dennison, born March 29, 1988. Brianna's parents are Jeff and Bridget Dennison. When Brianna was 6, her father passed away, causing immense pain for the family. However, with the support of her loved ones, she persevered through the difficult time. Brianna spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and Mendocino, California, her mother's hometown. Her love of travel and exploration took her to numerous countries, including Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. Brianna has a deep affection for children and animals, especially her dog Ozzy. She completed her high school education at Reno High School in 2006 and is majoring in child psychology as a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College. During winter break, on January 20, 2008, Brianna returned to her hometown of Reno from Santa Barbara to spend time with friends and family. Brianna and her friends regularly attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a tour company that caters to college students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno. That day, Brianna returned home around 4 a.m. to her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus. Brianna slept over at McKay Court's house. However, when McKay Court woke up the next morning at around 9 a.m., Brianna was no longer there. A small bloodstain was found on the pillow where she had slept, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were still at the house. McKay Court then contacted Brianna's parents and the local police in an attempt to locate Brianna. Police arrived and examined the scene. In the following days, police conducted forensic tests at the McKay Court home, where Brianna had been staying at the time of her abduction. During the investigation, police discovered DNA on the doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The blood on the pillow was confirmed to be Brianna's, leading police to focus on a theory that Brianna had been abducted. Police searched for Brianna in the University of Nevada Reno area, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the search. A DNA sample found on a doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was matched to at least 2 previous sex crimes in the same area. One occurred on November 13th, and the other on December 16, 2007. On January 29, 2008, a Reno woman said she knew a victim who had been held at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada Reno campus in October 2007. Police released a description of the suspect based on identifying information provided by women who were sexually assaulted by the suspect. In an effort to find Brianna's abductor, police interviewed nearly 100 sex offenders who lived within a mile of the McKay Court home. However, none of them were linked to Brianna's disappearance. A search effort was organized, with some 1,700 volunteers, including then First Lady of Nevada Dawn Gibbons, participating in a virtual search of the area. Sadly, the search yielded no results. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez was returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant in Reno. As he walked down the street, he noticed bright orange sheets standing out among a pile of discarded tree branches in a ditch near Reno Business Park. Upon closer inspection, Albert discovered that the orange socks on the feet belonged to a deceased woman. Albert had heard about Brianna Dennison's disappearance but initially thought the description did not match the person on Brianna's missing person flyer. Without a cell phone, Albert rushed back to his workplace to contact the police to report the incident. Police arrived at the scene and confirmed the victim's identity as Brianna Dennison. The investigation revealed that Brianna had been brutally attacked and murdered. Near her body, police found a pair of panties, which contained DNA from the perpetrator and DNA from an unidentified woman. Police suspected that the panties did not belong to Brianna, believing that they had been left there to distract police. Police then made a public appeal, asking anyone who recognized the panties to come forward to help identify the perpetrator. However, no one came forward. On November 25, 2008, James Michael Bella, 27, of Sparks, Nevada, James was arrested while he was taking his son to the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. He was booked into the Washoe County Jail on charges of murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Further investigation revealed that James was a former Marine with a history of violence, including a 2001 arrest for threatening his ex-girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. The following day, November 26, 2008, the Reno Police Department held a press conference to confirm that James' DNA matched the DNA found at Brianna's crime scene. During the press conference, it was also revealed that a friend of James' girlfriend anonymously accused James, through the secret witness program on November 1, 2008, after James' girlfriend confided in the friend that she had found underwear in James's truck while they were returning from Washington, where James had taken a job in March 2008. After reports of Brianna's case appeared in the media, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle involved in a similar incident a month earlier, police began questioning James, anonymously provided by a witness. However, James denied any wrongdoing and refused to provide a DNA sample for analysis. His girlfriend was also questioned by police, and she allowed them to take a DNA sample from her and James' 4-year-old son. DNA testing of James' son showed that, in this case, James' DNA was left at the house where Brianna was abducted and at the scene of the rape. Furthermore, during the trip to Washington, it was discovered that James had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the sexual assault. Police announced at a press conference that the truck was being transported back to Reno for a thorough examination and would be used as evidence in the case against James. On May 27, 2010, the jury returned a guilty verdict in James's trial, finding James responsible for the murder of Brianna Dennison. After 9 hours of deliberations, the jury convicted James of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. In an effort to avoid the death penalty, James' defense team presented mitigating circumstances, citing James' traumatic childhood with an alcoholic, abusive father. The jurors rejected the mitigating factors and gave James the death sentence instead. Later, on July 30, 2010, James received 4 more life sentences for other crimes, including rape and kidnapping of 2 victims prior to Brianna's abduction and murder. James's appeals have been denied over. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison is a story of pain, strength, and determination in the pursuit of justice. Brianna's family remains strong and persistent in the fight for justice. The collective efforts of everyone together make a safer world. And may Brianna rest in peace.